You think you're somebody important, welfare queen? The officer's laughter echoed through the courthouse hallway. Dr. Amara Johnson stood perfectly still, federal badge clutched in handcuffed wrists. What these two cops didn't know, in exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes they'd be begging the judge for mercy. But right now, they were still laughing, still confident, still believing the system would protect them like it always had. They had no idea who they'd just destroyed their lives arresting. Before this story gets insane, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment with your city. I need to see how far this truth travels. You're not ready for what happens next. She's lying through her teeth, Your Honor. Officer Marcus Martinez owned that witness stand. 23 years on the force showed in every confident gesture, every practiced pause. His dress uniform was crisp, his voice was steady, his story was rehearsed to perfection. March 15th, 9:47 p.m., Martinez said, not bothering with his notes. Defendant was driving erratically, crossing the center line. When we initiated the stop, she became immediately hostile. At the defense table, Amara Johnson sat motionless, hands folded, face neutral, not a flicker of emotion. Her lawyer, Sarah Chen, leaned back, watching Martinez like a predator watches wounded prey. The prosecutor, Davidson, nodded. What happened when you asked for identification? She refused to provide a driver's license. Martinez let a small laugh escape. Instead, she pulled out what appeared to be a fake federal badge, claimed she was with Homeland Security. He looked at the jury. Your Honor, I've been doing this job over 2 decades. I know a real badge when I see one. This was clearly bought online. 3 other officers from his precinct nodded in the gallery, the system protecting its own like always. Did you verify her credentials? Of course we did. Martinez sounded offended. Called dispatch. They had no record of any Dr. Amara Johnson working for any federal agency, even called the Regional Homeland Security Office. They'd never heard of her. Judge Patricia Morrison scribbled notes. 31 years on the bench. She'd seen every con. Her face revealed nothing. What was the defendant's behavior? Davidson asked. Martinez's jaw tightened like he was reliving pain. Aggressive, belligerent, kept demanding we call some specific number, claiming she had direct authorization from Washington. When we explained that wasn't protocol, she started threatening us. Pause. Perfect timing. Said she'd have our badges, said we'd be sorry. Another pause. That's when she tried to flee. She attempted to flee. Yes, sir. We had no choice but to arrest her for obstruction, resisting arrest, and impersonating a federal officer. Martinez stared at the jury. 7 women, 5 men. All white except 1 Asian woman in back. Several were already nodding. We gave her every opportunity to comply. Every opportunity. She chose this. The middle-aged man in plaid crossed his arms, already convinced. Davidson smiled. No further questions. Sarah Chen stood slowly. 42, Vietnamese American, 87% win rate. She buttoned her navy blazer and approached like she had all the time in the world. Officer Martinez, 23 years on the force. Correct. How many actual federal agents have you encountered in those 23 years? Martinez shifted, just slightly. Several times. Specific number, please. Maybe 10, 12 times. And the standard procedure for verifying their credentials was call dispatch. They run the badge number through federal database. Sarah nodded slowly. The federal database. When you called dispatch on March 15th, what specifically did they tell you? That they had no record of the defendant. Did dispatch confirm they checked the federal database? Half a second pause. They said they couldn't find her. That's not what I asked Officer Martinez. Did they specifically confirm they checked the federal database or just local records? Martinez's eyes flickered to Davidson. I assumed they checked everything. You assumed. Sarah let silence fill the room. Are you aware certain federal positions, particularly in Homeland Security, have classified status that doesn't appear in standard database searches? Objection. Davidson shot up. Leading. Sustained, Judge Morrison said, but her eyes stayed on Martinez. Sarah smiled. Let me rephrase. Have you ever been trained on protocols for classified federal personnel? We've had some training. Some training. Describe it. Martinez rubbed his jaw, his confidence cracking. Look, ma'am, I know what a real badge looks like. I know how real federal agents behave. This woman was neither. You determined that based on what exactly her appearance, her race, the car she was driving. Objection. Davidson was sweating now. Inflammatory accusations. Your Honor, I'm simply asking what criteria Officer Martinez used. Sarah's voice stayed calm. I'll allow it. Answer, Officer Martinez. Martinez's face reddened. It was the totality of circumstances. She was driving erratically, became hostile credentials, didn't check out. Had nothing to do with what? With anything except her behavior and her fake badge. Sarah walked to the defense table, picked up a document. Officer Martinez, this is your personnel file, Defense Exhibit A. Tell the jury how many excessive force complaints have been filed against you in the last 5 years. Objection relevance? Davidson's voice cracked. Goes to credibility and bias, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Answer. Martinez's face went fully red. 4. 4 complaints. How many involved people of color? I don't remember. All 4 Officer Martinez. All 4 involved black or Hispanic individuals. Sarah set the document down. 3 specifically mentioned racial profiling, correct? Those complaints were investigated and dismissed. Investigated by your own department, dismissed by your own department, yes. Sarah turned to the jury. The man in plaid had uncrossed his arms. No further questions? Martinez stepped down, suddenly looking smaller. He wouldn't meet anyone's eyes walking back. Prosecution calls Officer James Carter. Carter was younger, 32, blonde military-cut hair, Martinez's partner for 6 years. He took the oath with steady hands, clear voice. Davidson walked him through the same story, same timeline, same details. Carter was polished. They'd practiced together, made sure everything matched. He described Dr. Johnson as erratic and suspicious, her badge as obviously fake, her behavior as threatening. Sarah stood for cross-examination. Carter sat straighter, ready. Officer Carter, how long partnered with Officer Martinez? 6 years. Ever witnessed Officer Martinez treat anyone differently based on race? No, ma'am. Marcus is a good cop. A good cop? Did you witness the 4 excessive force complaints? Those situations were taken out of context. Were you present? Carter hesitated. For 2 of them. Did you file reports supporting your partner's version? I filed accurate reports. Accurate reports that led to all complaints being dismissed. Because they were baseless. Sarah nodded slowly. On March 15th, did Dr. Johnson provide a phone number for verification? She mentioned some number, but did you call it? No? Why not? Carter shifted, his confidence slipping. It wasn't proper protocol. We follow chain of command. Call dispatch, they handle verification. Even when someone specifically requests you call a direct verification line, that's not how it works. That's not how it works, Sarah repeated. Officer Carter, are you aware federal agents in classified capacities often provide direct verification numbers specifically because standard databases won't show their information? We were trained to follow our department's procedures. Even if those procedures prevent proper verification of legitimate federal credentials, Davidson objected. Judge Morrison overruled. The jury leaned forward now. Officer Carter, I want to read something. Sarah picked up another document. Your department's training manual, page 47, when encountering individuals claiming classified federal status, officers should utilize any verification methods provided by the individual, including direct agency contact numbers, before proceeding with arrest. Did you follow this protocol? Carter's jaw clenched. No. Why not? Because Martinez said Carter stopped. Too late. Because Martinez said what Officer Carter. Long pause. Complete courtroom silence. Because Martinez said she was full of it and we needed to teach her a lesson about lying to cops. The gallery erupted. Judge Morrison's gavel banged. Order? Davidson looked punched. Martinez in the gallery went pale. Sarah waited for silence. Teach her a lesson? Those were Officer Martinez's exact words. Carter stared at his hands. Yes. You went along with that. Yes. Even though you had training that said otherwise, yes. Even though she provided direct verification methods, yes. Carter's voice dropped. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have called the number. I knew it was wrong, but His voice broke. I was too much of a coward to stand up to my partner. The courtroom was frozen. This wasn't scripted. This was real confession. Sarah's voice softened. Officer Carter, did Officer Martinez use racial slurs during the arrest? Carter closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face. Yes. What did he call Dr. Johnson? He called her... Carter's voice shook. He called her a welfare queen. He said she was probably coming home from some cleaning job. He said... Carter opened his eyes, looked directly at Dr. Johnson. He said a lot of things I'm ashamed I didn't stop. Martinez in the gallery stood up. You son of a... Sit down, Officer Martinez. Judge Morrison's voice cracked like thunder. Bailiff, if he moves again, remove him from my courtroom. Martinez sat. His face was purple with rage. His career was evaporating in real time. Sarah turned to Carter. How many times has Officer Martinez used racial language about suspects? Dozens, maybe hundreds over 6 years. Did you ever report it? No. Carter was crying openly now. I told myself it was just talk, that it didn't matter, that he was still a good cop when it counted. He looked at the jury. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And Dr. Johnson paid the price for my cowardice. No further questions. Davidson didn't even attempt cross-examination. What could he say Judge Morrison called recess? 1 hour. We reconvene at 2 p.m.? The hallway exploded with activity. Reporters swarmed. Martinez grabbed Carter's arm, yanked him into a corner. What the hell was that? Martinez hissed. You just destroyed us both. Carter jerked away. No, Marcus, you destroyed us. I'm just done lying about it. We had a deal. We practiced the story. The story was a lie. Carter's voice rose. Other officers turned to look. She was a real federal agent, and we arrested her anyway because you couldn't stand the idea that a black woman might actually be important. Martinez's hand balled into a fist. For a second, it looked like he might swing. Then he saw the cameras, saw the crowd watching. His hand dropped. You're dead to me, Martinez said. Better than being dead inside, Carter shot back. He walked away, shoulders shaking. In a small conference room, Dr. Johnson sat with Sarah Chen. Maya, her daughter, had arrived during the morning session. She sat beside her mother, holding her hand. Mom, Maya said quietly. That was intense. Dr. Johnson nodded. It's not over yet. Sarah opened her briefcase, pulled out a laptop. Dr. Johnson, I need to ask you something. The evidence we discussed, the video footage. Are you absolutely certain you want to present it? Why wouldn't I? Because once it's out there forever. The things Martinez said, the way he treated you, it's going to be painful to watch. It's going to be replayed on every news channel. Your daughter will see it. The whole country will see it. Dr. Johnson looked at Maya, at her daughter's tear-stained face, at the pain already there. Then she looked back at Sarah. How many other people has Martinez done this to? We've found 8 complaints buried in his file. All people of color, all dismissed by his department. And how many more are out there who didn't complain, who didn't have the resources to fight back, who just accepted it because they thought that's how the system works? Sarah nodded slowly. A lot. Probably hundreds over his career. Then yes, Dr. Johnson's voice was steel. I want that video played. I want every second of it entered into evidence. I want the jury to see exactly who Marcus Martinez is, and I want every other officer like him to know that this ends now. Maya squeezed her mother's hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. Dr. Johnson squeezed back. Don't be proud yet, baby. We're just getting started. At her home that evening, Dr. Johnson sat in her office. The room was lined with commendations, photos with presidents, awards from international security conferences, her doctoral dissertation on domestic terrorism, her FBI Academy graduation photo from 1994. She opened her laptop, navigated to a password-protected folder labeled March 15th Incident. Inside were 3 video files, 2 audio recordings, 47 pages of documentation. She'd spent the last 2 weeks preparing this moment, securing the evidence, making sure nothing could be deleted or destroyed, calling in favors from colleagues across multiple federal agencies. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Dr. Johnson, this is Captain Sullivan from Martinez's precinct. We need to talk about resolving this situation quietly. I'm sure we can reach an arrangement that satisfies everyone. Dr. Johnson stared at the text. An arrangement. They wanted to make this go away, offer her money, a settlement, anything to protect Martinez. She deleted the text without responding. Her phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from an hour ago. She'd missed it during the trial. She played it on speaker. Dr. Johnson? And this is Deputy Director James Chen. The voice was familiar, her direct superior at Homeland Security. I wanted you to know that I've been monitoring your situation. The secretary has been briefed. The director of the FBI has been briefed. And as of this afternoon, the attorney general has been briefed. A pause on the recording. What happened to you is unacceptable. When one of our senior officials is arrested and mistreated because of racism, it's not just an attack on you, it's an attack on the entire federal law enforcement community. We have your back, whatever you need, whatever resources you need. You have the full support of this department and this administration. Another pause. Also, I'm flying in tomorrow. I'll be testifying as a character witness if your lawyer needs it. These officers need to understand that you don't just work for Homeland Security. You are Homeland Security. See you in court. The voicemail ended. Dr. Johnson leaned back in her chair. For the first time since the arrest, she smiled. Maya knocked on the doorframe. Mom, you okay? Come here, baby girl. Maya sat down. Dr. Johnson turned the laptop screen toward her. Want to see something? She opened the first video file. Dashcam footage from Martinez's patrol car. Time-stamped 9:47 p.m. March 15th. A black BMW pulled over to the side of a dark highway. Two officers approached with flashlights. Let me do the talking, Martinez's voice said through the speakers. This is going to be fun. What do you mean? Carter asked. You'll see. Trust me. Dr. Johnson on screen rolled down her window, already holding her credentials. Good evening, officers. I'm Dr. Amara Johnson with Homeland Security. I'm returning from a classified briefing at Quantico. Here's my badge and identification. Sure you are, sweetheart. Martinez's voice dripped with sarcasm. And I'm the director of the FBI. Nice try. Maya's hand went to her mouth. On screen, Doctor. Johnson stayed perfectly calm. Officer, I understand this is unusual. I'm providing you with my direct verification number. If you call this number, the National Security Operations Center will confirm my identity and position within 30 seconds. Let me guess. Martinez leaned into the window, his face filling the camera frame. It's going to be some friend of yours pretending to be official, right, lady? We're not stupid. We've seen this scam before. I'm asking you to follow proper protocol. Call the number. Here's what's going to happen. Martinez's voice got harder. You're going to admit this badge is fake, apologize for wasting our time, and maybe we let you go with a warning. Or you can keep playing this game and spend the night in jail. Your choice. I cannot admit my credentials are fake because they are legitimate, officer. I am requesting you follow federal verification protocols. Marcus, maybe we should just call Carter's voice. Shut it, Carter. I know a scammer when I see one. Martinez's flashlight beam moved across Dr. Johnson's face. The camera caught every detail. What's the matter? Welfare Queen thought you could pretend to be somebody important, thought a fake badge would impress us. Maya made a small sound, almost a sob. Dr. Johnson reached over and paused the video. You don't have to watch this, baby. Yes, I do. Maya's voice was fierce. I need to see what they did to you. I need to understand. Dr. Johnson pressed play. On screen, her voice stayed steady, level, professional. Officer Martinez, I am noting your badge number for my official report. I am noting that you have refused to follow proper verification protocol as outlined in federal law enforcement guidelines. I am noting your use of racially charged language. I am requesting once more that you call the verification number I have provided. You're noting nothing. Martinez yanked the car door open. Step out of the vehicle. Now. I am a federal officer operating in official capacity. You do not have the authority to detain me without timidity. Get out of the car before I drag you out. Dr. Johnson stepped out slowly, hands clearly visible. I am complying under protest. I am requesting you contact my office immediately. I am requesting, turn around, hands behind your back. This is unlawful arrest of a federal officer. I am warning you that... The handcuffs clicked shut. Martinez laughed. Actually laughed. God, Carter, can you believe this? She really thinks she's somebody. Probably watched too many movies. Thought she could play dress up, and we'd fall for it. Carter's voice was quieter, uncertain. Marcus, what if she's telling the truth? What if we should call? She's not telling the truth. Look at her. Martinez's voice rose. You really think Homeland Security hires people who look like her for anything except diversity quotas? Come on, man, use your head. On screen, Doctor. Johnson said nothing, just stood there in handcuffs head high as Martinez searched her car without warrant. Oh, look, Martinez said, pulling out Dr. Johnson's briefcase. What's this more fake badges, secret agent, decoder rings? He laughed again. opened the briefcase, pulled out official documents, classified briefing materials, security clearance papers. His laughter stopped. "Marcus," Carter said, "these look real." "They're fakes. They have to be. Anyone can print official-looking documents." "But what if—" "They're fakes." Martinez threw the briefcase back in the car. "We're taking her in. Let the station sort it out." They loaded Dr. Johnson into the back of the patrol car. She sat perfectly still, face neutral, but the camera caught her eyes. There was no fear there, no panic, just cold, calculating assessment. "Think she'll sue us?" Carter asked as they drove. "For what? Doing our jobs?" Martinez laughed. "Besides, who's going to believe her? We're cops. We have the system behind us. She's just another black woman trying to play victim and get a payday." In the back seat, Dr. Johnson's eyes closed briefly, like she was memorizing every word. "Even if she tries to make something of it," Martinez continued, "our union will back us, the department will back us, Captain Sullivan will make sure any complaint disappears like all the others. We're untouchable, brother. That's what the badge means." The video ended. Maya was crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Dr. Johnson pulled her daughter close. "Don't be sorry, baby. Be angry, be furious, and then channel that fury into changing the system so this never happens to anyone else." How do we change something this big?" Dr. Johnson gestured at the laptop. "We start by showing the world exactly what happened. No filter, no sanitization. We let them see the real Marcus Martinez, the real systemic racism, the real abuse of power." "Hi," her voice hardened. "And then we make damn sure there are consequences." She opened the second video file. This one was from Carter's body cam. The angle was different, but the audio was even clearer. "You really think she's lying?" Carter asked as they processed Dr. Johnson at the station. "Of course she's lying. People like that always lie. They think if they act important enough, we'll believe them and let them go." Martinez filled out the arrest report. "Trust me, I've been doing this long enough to know. You can tell by looking at someone whether they're worth taking seriously." "But what if her credentials were real?" Martinez looked up, stared at Carter. "Then she would have acted like it. Real federal agents don't get hostile, they don't make threats. They cooperate because they understand how the system works." He went back to writing. "This woman, she's got an attitude problem. Probably thinks she's entitled to special treatment because of..." He stopped himself. "Because of what?" Carter asked. "Never mind, just finish the paperwork." But the body cam had caught Martinez's face. The expression, the barely concealed disgust. Dr. Johnson paused the video again. "You see that's the moment he almost said it out loud, almost admitted what this was really about." "Can we use this in court?" Maya asked. "Oh, baby, tomorrow the whole world is going to see this." She opened the third file. This one was audio only, a phone call recording. "Martinez." His voice on the recording. "It's Captain Sullivan. We got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "That woman you arrested last night. Someone from D.C. is asking questions. Someone high up." Silence on the line. "How high up?" Martinez finally asked. "High enough that I'm calling you at midnight. High enough that I'm worried." Sullivan's voice was tense. "What exactly did she say when you arrested her?" "She claimed to be with Homeland Security, had what looked like a federal badge, but dispatch said they couldn't find her in the system, so we proceeded with the arrest for impersonation." "Did she give you a verification number?" Another pause. "She mentioned some number. I didn't call it." "Why the hell not?" "Because it's not protocol. We call dispatch. They verify. That's procedure." "Marcus," Sullivan's voice dropped. "Did you use any inappropriate language during the arrest?" "What? No, well, I was completely professional." "You're sure? Because if there's dash cam footage..." "The dash cam was malfunctioning that night. I already filed the report. No footage." Sullivan sighed. "Okay, good. Make sure that stays the case. Make sure your report and Carter's report match exactly. And Marcus, if this woman turns out to be real, if she actually is federal, we need to get ahead of this. Understood?" "Understood. But sir, she's not real. I'd stake my career on it." "That's exactly what you're doing. Don't screw this up." The call ended. Dr. Usar. Johnson looked at Maya. "That call happened 7 hours after my arrest, while I was still in a holding cell. They were already conspiring to cover it up." "But you said the dash cam was working. They lied about that." "They tried to lie about it. What they didn't know is that every police dashcam in Virginia automatically uploads to a federal backup server within 2 hours of recording. It's part of the Justice Department's Transparency Initiative. Dr. Johnson smiled. An initiative I helped design 3 years ago. Maya's eyes widened. You planned for this, not specifically, but I've seen enough police misconduct cases to know that evidence mysteriously disappears. So when I was writing policy for the Justice Department, I made sure there were redundant backups that individual officers couldn't access or delete. She gestured at the laptop. Martinez thought he deleted the footage. He didn't. It was already safely stored on a federal server, and I knew exactly who to call to secure it before anyone else could try to destroy it. That's genius, Mom. That's 31 years of experience in federal law enforcement. Dr. Johnson closed the laptop. Tomorrow, Sarah is going to play these videos in court. The jury is going to see everything, hear everything, and then they're going to understand exactly what kind of officers arrested me. What do you think will happen to Martinez? Dr. Johnson's expression hardened. What should have happened years ago? Justice. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Captain Sullivan. Dr. Johnson, I apologize for the earlier message. I've spoken with Officer Martinez, and I believe there may have been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could meet to discuss this privately. I'm sure we can find a resolution that works for everyone. Dr. Johnson showed the text to Maya. He's scared, Maya said. He should be. Doctor. Johnson typed a response. Captain Sullivan, there will be no private meetings, no settlements, no quiet resolutions. This matter will be decided in court in public with full transparency. What happened to me happens to too many people who don't have my resources or connections. That ends now. See you in court. She hit send. Maya hugged her mother. You're incredible. I'm angry, Dr. Johnson corrected, and I'm channeling that anger into change. There's a difference. They sat together in the quiet office surrounded by the evidence of Dr. Johnson's career. 3 decades of service, countless commendations, 4 presidents, 47 countries, and it had almost meant nothing because 2 officers saw her skin color before they saw her badge. Mom, Maya said quietly, after this is over, what happens next? Dr. Johnson thought about the folder in her desk drawer, the proposal she'd been working on for months. The Johnson Protocol. Mandatory verification training for every law enforcement officer in America. New accountability standards. Independent oversight of complaints. Consequences for officers who abuse their power. Next hunt. Dr. Johnson said, we make sure this never happens again, to anyone. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread about Carter's confession. Reporters lined the back wall. Judge Morrison had to gavel for order before proceedings even started. Defense may call its next witness, Judge Morrison said. Sarah Chen stood. Your Honor, before we proceed, with witness testimony, defense would like to present video evidence. We have dashcam footage from Officer Martinez's patrol car, body cam footage from Officer Carter, and audio recordings of subsequent phone calls. This evidence is crucial to establishing what actually happened on the night of March 15th. Davidson shot to his feet. Objection. We were not provided with this evidence during discovery. Because it didn't exist during discovery, Sarah said calmly. This footage was deleted by Officer Martinez in violation of evidence preservation laws. Defense obtained it through federal backup systems only last week. Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed. Deleted evidence? Yes, Your Honor. We have phone recordings of Officer Martinez and Captain Sullivan discussing the deletion. Martinez in the gallery had gone white. Sullivan sitting beside him looked like he might be sick. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. I want to see this evidence now. Sarah walked to the laptop connected to the courtroom screen. Your Honor, I should warn the court that this footage contains explicit racist language and disturbing conduct by the officers. Play it. Sarah pressed play. The screen lit up. The black BMW, the 2 officers approaching. Let me do the talking. This is going to be fun. For the next 6 minutes and 43 seconds, the courtroom watched in complete silence. They heard Martinez call Dr. Johnson a welfare queen, heard him mock her credentials, heard him refuse to follow protocol, heard him laugh about arresting her. They saw Dr. Johnson stay calm, professional, requesting proper verification at every step, complying even as her rights were violated. When the first video ended, Sarah played the second. Carter's body cam. Martinez's disgusted expression. His barely concealed admission about judging people by looking at them. Then the audio. Martinez and Sullivan conspiring to delete evidence, planning their cover-up. When it ended, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. 3 jurors were crying. The man in plaid had his head in his hands. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, just staring at the blank screen. Judge Morrison's face was carved from granite. "Mr. Davidson, does your client wish to change his testimony?" Davidson looked back at Martinez. Martinez sat frozen, trapped. His entire defense had just evaporated. "Your Honor," Davidson said weakly, "I need to consult with my client." "You have 10 minutes. Judge Morrison stood. "Court is in recess." The moment she left, the courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors to file their stories. Spectators were shouting. Martinez sat motionless, staring at nothing. Sarah turned to Dr. Johnson. "How do you feel?" Dr. Johnson's face was calm, but her eyes blazed with satisfaction. "Like we're just getting started." Because tomorrow she was taking the stand. Tomorrow the courtroom would hear her story in her own words. And tomorrow Deputy Director James Chen was flying in to testify about exactly who Dr. Amara Johnson was and what these officers had done by arresting her. Tomorrow the truth would be complete. But tonight, Marcus Martinez would go home knowing his career was over. Knowing his lies had been exposed. Knowing that the woman he'd mocked and arrested was about to destroy everything he'd built. In the hallway, Maya grabbed her mother's hand. "Mom, that video! I can't believe what they said to you, how you stayed so calm." "I stayed calm because I knew this moment was coming," Dr. Johnson said. "I knew that eventually the truth would matter more than their lies. I just had to be patient." "I don't know if I could have been that patient." Dr. Johnson smiled. "That's why you're going to finish law school, learn the system inside and out, and then use that knowledge to change it. Patience isn't passive, baby. Patience is strategic." They walked outside where the news cameras waited. Dr. Johnson stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. "Dr. Johnson," a reporter shouted. "How do you feel about the video evidence?" Dr. Johnson looked directly into the camera. "I feel like the truth is finally coming to light. For me and for the 8 other victims we've identified who Officer Martinez targeted over his career. This isn't about one bad arrest. This is about a pattern of racist conduct that was enabled and covered up by his department. What do you want to see happen? I want justice, real justice. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been in this situation without the resources to fight back." Her voice strengthened. "And I want systemic change. I want training reform. I want accountability. I want every officer in this country to understand that the badge is not a shield for racism." "Do you think you'll win?" Dr. Johnson's smile was sharp. "Watch tomorrow's testimony and ask me again." She walked away, leaving the reporters shouting questions behind her. That night, she sat at her desk one more time, reviewed her testimony for tomorrow, made sure every detail was perfect, every fact was unassailable. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You think you're going to destroy me? You haven't won yet, bitch." Dr. Johnson took a screenshot, forwarded it to Sarah Chen with a note, "More evidence for tomorrow." Then she blocked the number and went to bed. Because tomorrow, Marcus Martinez would learn the most important lesson of his life. You don't underestimate Duramara Johnson. Tomorrow, she would take that witness stand. Tomorrow, she would tell her story. And tomorrow, she would make sure the entire world understood exactly who she was and what these officers had tried to do to her. Tomorrow, justice would begin. The next morning arrived with unusual weight. Dr. Johnson woke at 5 a.m., not from an alarm, but from the knowledge that today would define everything. She dressed in the same navy suit, the same pearl earrings. Consistency mattered. Control mattered. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Maya was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee she hadn't touched. "Couldn't sleep?" Dr. Johnson asked. "I kept thinking about that video, about what they said to you." Maya's voice was raw. "How do you not hate them?" Dr. Johnson poured her own coffee. "Hate takes energy, baby. I need that energy for what I'm about to do today." They drove to the courthouse in silence. The parking lot was already packed at 7:30 a.m. News vans lined the street. Protesters held signs that said "Justice for Dr. Johnson" and "End police racism." Counter-protesters held signs defending law enforcement. Security had tripled. Inside, Sarah Chen was waiting with her laptop open, documents spread across 3 tables in the conference room. "Ready?" Sarah asked. "I've been ready for 31 years, Dr. Johnson said. At 9 a.m. sharp, Judge Morrison took the bench. The courtroom was beyond capacity. People stood in the back. Cameras filled every corner the judge had permitted. Martinez sat at the defense table looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Carter sat separately now with his own lawyer. The partnership was shattered. Davidson kept glancing at the door like he wanted to run. "Defense may call its witness," Judge Morrison said. Sarah stood. "Defense calls Amara Johnson." Dr. Johnson walked to the witness stand. Every eye in the room followed her. She placed her hand on the Bible, took the oath, and sat down. Her hands folded calmly in her lap. Her expression neutral, but alert. Sarah started gently. "Dr. Johnson, please tell the court what you do for a living." "I'm Deputy Director of Domestic Operations for the Department of Homeland Security." Her voice was clear, strong, filling every corner of the courtroom. "I oversee counterterrorism efforts across 17 states. I coordinate with FBI, CIA, NSA, and local law enforcement agencies on matters of national security." The jury sat forward. Martinez stared at the table. "How long have you held this position?" 8 years? Before that, I spent 15 years with the FBI specializing in domestic terrorism, white supremacist organizations, and organized crime." "Your educational background?" "Bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Howard University, 1994. Master's in international security from Georgetown, 1998. PhD in counterterrorism policy from Harvard, 2006. Sarah let that sink in. Let the jury absorb who was really sitting in front of them. "Dr. Johnson, can you walk us through the night of March 15th in your own words? Take your time." Dr. Johnson nodded. "I was returning from Quantico, where I'd spent the day in classified briefings with FBI leadership about a credible terrorist threat to the Mid-Atlantic region. I left Quantico at approximately 9:15 p.m. I was driving north on Highway 95 when I saw police lights behind me at 9:47 p.m. Her voice stayed level, professional, but there was an undercurrent of steel. I pulled over immediately. I gathered my federal credentials before the officers reached my window because I know protocol. I know that identifying myself early prevents confusion. When Officer Martinez approached, I rolled down my window and stated clearly, 'Good evening, officer. I'm Dr. Amara Johnson with the Department of Homeland Security. I'm returning from a classified briefing at Quantico. Here is my badge and federal identification.' What was Officer Martinez's response? He laughed. He said, and I quote, 'Sure you are, sweetheart, and I'm the director of the FBI.' Dr. Johnson's eyes never left the jury. I remained calm. I understood he might not have encountered classified federal personnel before. I said, 'Officer, I understand this is unusual. I'm providing you with my direct verification number to the National Security Operations Center. If you call this number, they will confirm my identity and position within 30 seconds. Did he call that number? No. He said he wasn't stupid and that he'd seen this scam before. He accused me of having a friend pretend to be official. Dr. Johnson paused. I tried 3 more times as to get him to call the verification number. 3 times he refused. When did things escalate? Dr. Johnson's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of emotion. When Officer Martinez leaned into my window and called me a welfare queen, when he said I was pretending to be somebody important, when he asked if I thought a fake badge would impress them. The courtroom was silent. You could hear breathing. I informed him I was noting his badge number for my official report. I informed him he was refusing to follow proper federal verification protocols. I informed him his language was racially charged and inappropriate. He responded by yanking my car door open and ordering me out. Did you resist? No, I complied immediately with hands visible at all times. I continued to request he contact my office. I continued to inform him that detaining a federal officer without proper cause was a federal crime. He handcuffed me anyway. Sarah walked closer. Dr. Johnson, what went through your mind at that moment? For the first time, Dr. Johnson's professional mask cracked slightly. I thought about Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor. I thought about every black person who'd been in a situation with police where compliance didn't matter, where being right didn't matter, where having credentials didn't matter because the officer had already decided who you were based on your skin color. 3 jurors were crying now. I thought about my daughter, about whether I'd see her again, about whether this would be the traffic stop that ended with me dead because an officer felt threatened by a black woman who refused to accept his version of reality. Martinez wouldn't look up. His hands were shaking. But mostly, Dr. Johnson's voice hardened. I thought about how I was going to make absolutely certain this officer never did this to anyone else ever again. Sarah nodded. What happened after you were handcuffed? Officer Martinez searched my car without warrant or consent. He found my briefcase containing classified documents, security clearance papers, and official correspondence. He laughed again, called them fakes, said anyone could print official-looking documents. Then he and Officer Carter drove me to the police station. Did they continue to use inappropriate language? Yes, in the car, Officer Martinez told Officer Carter that I was just another black woman trying to play victim and get a payday. He said their union would back them, that the department would back them, that Captain Sullivan would make any complaint disappear like all the others. He said, and I quote, "We're untouchable, brother. That's what the badge means." The jury looked at Martinez with visible disgust now. How long were you held at the station? 6 hours. I was placed in a holding cell. I wasn't allowed to make a phone call for the first 2 hours. When I finally was permitted to call, I contacted my office. It took another 4 hours for my staff to locate me, coordinate with local FBI, and secure my release. 6 hours in a cell. What did you do during that time? Dr. Johnson smiled slightly, a cold, calculating smile. I memorized every detail, every officer's name and badge number, every procedural violation, every piece of evidence I would need to ensure accountability. I didn't waste time being angry. I used that time to build my case. Sarah turned to the jury. Dr. Johnson, why didn't you just tell the officers more forcefully who you were? Because I shouldn't have to. Dr. Johnson's voice cut through the room like a blade. I provided proper federal credentials. I offered immediate verification through official channels. I complied with every lawful order. The failure was not mine. The failure was Officer Martinez's inability to conceive that a black woman could hold a position of real authority. She leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear about something. I have briefed 4 sitting presidents. I have coordinated responses to 3 domestic terrorist attacks. I have testified before Congress 11 times. I have written federal law enforcement policy that is used in 47 countries. My security clearance is so high that I cannot discuss most of what I do in open court. Her eyes moved to Martinez. He still wouldn't look up. But none of that mattered to Officer Martinez. He looked at me and saw a welfare queen, a liar, someone playing dress-up, and that tells you everything you need to know about why we're here today. The courtroom was electric. The energy was palpable. Sarah walked back to her table. Dr. Johnson, one more question. After your arrest, after you were released, why didn't you just file a complaint through normal channels? Why take this to trial? Dr. Johnson's expression hardened. Because I did research. I found 8 other complaints against Officer Martinez in the last 5 years, all from people of color, all dismissed by his department, all buried by Captain Sullivan. She looked at the jury. Normal channels don't work when the system protects its own. This needed to be public. It needed to be undeniable. It needed to send a message that no officer is above accountability. No further questions. Davidson stood slowly. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. Dr. Johnson, he started, his voice lacking conviction. Isn't it possible you were driving erratically that night, that the stop was legitimate? I was driving exactly the speed limit on an empty highway. There was no legitimate reason for the stop. But you admit you were on the road late at night. I was returning from my job, at Quantico, where I'd spent the day working to keep this country safe. Her voice was ice. There is nothing suspicious about doing my job, counselor. Davidson shuffled his papers. Dr. Johnson, when Officer Martinez questioned your credentials, couldn't that be interpreted as him simply being thorough? Being thorough would be calling the verification number I provided 3 times. Being thorough would be following the protocols outlined in his own department's training manual. What Officer Martinez did was make an assumption based on prejudice, and then refuse to correct that assumption when presented with multiple opportunities. But surely you can understand why an officer might be skeptical. Skeptical of what Mr. Davidson just... Dr. Johnson's stare could freeze blood. Skeptical that a black woman could be a federal officer. Skeptical that someone who looks like me could have real authority. Please finish your thought. I'm very interested in hearing you complete that sentence. Davidson backtracked. I simply meant that fake badges do exist, and real badges exist. Mine was real, my identification was real, my verification number was real. Everything I told Officer Martinez was true. The only thing fake in this scenario was his claim that he followed proper procedure. Davidson tried a few more questions. Each answer made his case worse. Finally, he sat down defeated. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Dr. Johnson, I have a question. Given your position and clearance level, why didn't you simply have your office intervene immediately? Dr. Johnson met the judge's eyes. Because I wanted to see how the system would handle this. I wanted to know if a black woman without my resources would have received justice. And Your Honor, the answer is no. Without my position, without my connections, without my ability to secure that dashcam footage, Officer Martinez would have gotten away with this. His report would have been accepted. I would have been convicted of impersonating a federal officer, and he would have moved on to his next victim. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. You may step down. Dr. Johnson returned to her seat. Sarah squeezed her hand under the table. Defense calls Deputy Director James Chen of the Department of Homeland Security, Sarah announced. The back doors opened. A man in a dark suit walked in with federal bearing and presidential security detail flanking him. The entire courtroom turned. Martinez looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Deputy Director Chen took the stand and was sworn in. He was 58 Chinese American with the calm demeanor of someone who'd spent decades in crisis management. Director Chen, Sarah began, how do you know doctors? Amara Johnson. Dr. Johnson reports directly to me. She's one of the most accomplished counterterrorism experts in federal service. In my 29 years with Homeland Security, I've never worked with anyone more dedicated or effective. Can you describe her position and responsibilities? Dr. Johnson oversees domestic counterterrorism operations for 17 states. She coordinates threat assessments, manages interagency responses, and advises senior leadership, including the Secretary of Homeland Security and the President's National Security Council. Chen looked at the jury. To put this in perspective, there are approximately 3,000 people working in Homeland Security. Dr. Johnson is in the top 12. Her clearance level is above mine in certain areas. The jury's eyes widened. Director Chen, is it possible Dr. Johnson's credentials wouldn't appear in a standard database search? It's not just possible, it's guaranteed. Dr. Johnson's position is classified. Her full identity and role are protected information. When law enforcement encounters someone with her clearance level, they are required to use the direct verification methods provided by that individual. That's federal protocol. What should Officer Martinez have done when Dr. Johnson provided her verification number? Chen's jaw tightened. He should have called it immediately. Within 30 seconds, he would have reached the National Security Operations Center. They would have confirmed her identity and informed him he was speaking with a senior federal official. They would have instructed him to release her immediately and apologize for the inconvenience. What happens when an officer refuses to follow that protocol? They commit a federal crime. Unlawful detention of a federal officer, obstruction of a federal investigation, violation of classified security protocols. Chen leaned forward. What Officer Martinez did wasn't just wrong or racist, it was criminal. He interfered with an active counterterrorism operation by detaining the person coordinating threat response for the Mid-Atlantic region. The courtroom was silent. Sarah continued. Director Chen, in your professional opinion, why did Officer Martinez refuse to verify Dr. Johnson's credentials? Objection. Davidson shot up. Calls for speculation. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. The witness is qualified to offer expert opinion. Chen looked directly at Martinez. In my professional opinion, Officer Martinez saw Dr. Johnson's race and gender before he saw her badge. He made an immediate judgment that someone who looked like her couldn't possibly hold the position she claimed, and rather than follow protocol that would have proven him wrong, he doubled down on his prejudice and arrested her. Martinez's face was scarlet. His hands gripped the table. Director Chen, you mentioned Dr. Johnson was returning from briefings about an active counterterrorism operation. Can you elaborate? Not in open court, but I can say that the 6 hours Dr. Johnson spent in a holding cell were 6 hours she couldn't spend coordinating federal response to a credible threat. Officer Martinez's actions didn't just violate Dr. Johnson's rights. They potentially compromised national security. The jury looked shocked. Two were shaking their heads in disbelief. Sarah nodded. One final question, Director Chen. What does Dr. Johnson mean to the Department of Homeland Security? Chen's professional mask cracked slightly. Emotion showed through. Dr. Johnson is irreplaceable. She's written policy that saved countless lives. She's trained hundreds of agents. She's advised presidents. When there's a crisis, she's one of the first people we call because we know she'll handle it. His voice hardened. What Officer Martinez did to her is an insult to every federal law enforcement officer in this country. We are supposed to work together. We are supposed to respect each other's authority. Instead, he saw a black woman and decided she wasn't worthy of basic professional courtesy, let alone the respect owed to her position. No further questions. Davidson didn't even attempt cross-examination. What could he possibly ask? Judge Morrison called for a 15-minute recess. The courtroom erupted the moment she left. In the hallway, reporters surrounded Deputy Director Chen. He gave a brief statement about the department's full support for Dr. Johnson and their commitment to working with Congress on law enforcement reform. Then security escorted him away. Dr. Johnson stood with Maya and Sarah near the windows. "That was powerful, Maya said. "Chen defending you like that." "James and I have worked together for 8 years," Dr. Johnson said. "He knows what I'm capable of, and he knows what this case represents." Sarah checked her phone. "The news is going insane. The video from yesterday plus today's testimony, it's everywhere. Martinez's career is over. Sullivan is under investigation. The whole department is being scrutinized." "Good," Dr. Johnson said simply. They returned to the courtroom. Judge Morrison took the bench. "Does the defense have any additional witnesses?" she asked. "No, Your Honor," Sarah said. "Defense rests." "Does the prosecution wish to present rebuttal?" Davidson stood slowly. "Your Honor, given the evidence presented, the prosecution requests a continuance to review our case." Judge Morrison's expression was granite. "Mr. Davidson, your clients have been exposed committing perjury, tampering with evidence, and conspiring to cover up a federal crime. What exactly do you need to review?" Davidson swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I need to consult with my clients about potentially changing their pleas. You have until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. Outside, the media circus was in full force. Dr. Johnson stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. Cameras surrounded her. Reporters shouted questions. She held up one hand. Silence fell. "Today you heard the truth," she said. "You heard what Officer Martinez did to me. You heard what he said to me. You heard how he violated federal law, deleted evidence, and conspired to cover it up." Her voice strengthened. "But this case isn't just about me. It's about every person Officer Martinez has targeted over his career. It's about the system that protected him. It's about making sure this never happens again." "Dr. Johnson," a reporter called out, "what do you want to happen to Officer Martinez?" "I want justice, real justice. I want him held accountable under federal law. I want the same standard applied to him that would be applied to any citizen who assaulted a federal officer." She paused. "And I want systemic reform. I want mandatory training for every law enforcement officer on how to verify federal credentials. I want independent oversight of excessive force complaints. I want consequences for officers who abuse their power." "Do you think you've won?" Dr. Johnson's smile was sharp. "Ask me tomorrow when Martinez changes his plea." She walked away, leaving the reporters scrambling to file their stories. That evening, Maya and Dr. Johnson sat in the quiet house. The TV played news coverage on mute. Every channel was covering the trial. Martinez's photo was everywhere. The video of him calling Dr. Johnson a welfare queen played on loop. "Mom," Maya said softly, "you were amazing today. The way you testified. The way you held it together. I didn't have a choice, baby. If I'd broken down, if I'd shown anger or pain, they would have used it against me. They would have said I was emotional or unstable or unprofessional." Dr. Johnson's voice was tired. "Black women don't get to show emotion in courtrooms. We have to be twice as composed, twice as articulate, twice as perfect. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But that's the reality we live in." She looked at Maya. "That's why representation matters. That's why you finishing law school matters. The more of us there are in positions of power, the harder it becomes for people like Martinez to dismiss us." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Do you really think he'll change his plea?" "His lawyer would be insane not to advise it. The evidence is overwhelming. The video, the audio, Chen's testimony, my testimony. If this goes to a jury, Martinez is looking at serious federal time. If he pleads guilty, maybe he can negotiate something less severe." "Do you want him to plead guilty?" Dr. Johnson considered this. "Part of me wants the jury to convict him, wants 12 citizens to look at the evidence and say this is unacceptable. But part of me just wants this over so I can focus on making sure it never happens again." Her phone rang. Sarah Chen. "Turn on Channel 7, Sarah said without preamble. Dr. Johnson unmuted the TV and changed the channel. A press conference. Captain Sullivan standing at a podium looking like death. "This afternoon I tendered my resignation as captain of the police department," Sullivan said, reading from prepared remarks. "The events of the past week have made it clear that I failed in my duties to properly supervise my officers and investigate complaints. I take full responsibility for that failure." The reporters erupted with questions. Sullivan ignored them and walked away. "He's trying to get ahead of the criminal charges," Sarah said on the phone, FBI is investigating him for conspiracy and obstruction. Resignation won't save him." "Good," Dr. Johnson said. "Also, I just got word. Martinez's lawyer contacted me. They want to talk about a plea deal." Dr. Johnson sat up straighter. "What are the terms?" "They're asking for what they want. I'll counter tomorrow. But my guess Martinez pleads guilty to unlawful detention, civil rights violations, and evidence tampering. In exchange, we recommend concurrent sentencing instead of consecutive. He's looking at probably 5 to 7 years federal prison." "And Carter?" "Carter's already negotiating separately. His lawyer is smarter. He's offering full cooperation against Martinez and Sullivan in exchange for probation and loss of his badge." Dr. Johnson thought about this. Carter had broken on the stand, had shown genuine remorse. He'd been complicit, but he hadn't been the driving force. "I can live with that for Carter," she said, "but Martinez needs real time." "Agreed. I'll push for 7 years, minimum." They talked for a few more minutes about strategy, then hung up. Maya had been listening. "It's really almost over." "The trial part, yes, but the work is just beginning." Johnson pulled out her laptop, opened the folder she'd been building for months. "I've been drafting legislation, the Johnson Protocol. It requires every law enforcement agency receiving federal funding to implement mandatory training on verifying federal credentials, especially classified personnel. It creates independent oversight boards for excessive force complaints. It mandates body cameras that upload to federal servers in real time so footage can't be deleted. And it establishes serious federal penalties for officers who violate civil rights." "That's ambitious." "That's necessary. This case has given me a platform. Media attention, political capital. I need to use it while people are paying attention." She looked at Maya. "In a month, this will be old news. Some other scandal will dominate headlines. If I'm going to change things, it has to be now." Maya read through the proposal. "This is really good, Mom. Have you shown it to anyone?" "I've had preliminary conversations with 3 senators and 5 representatives. They're interested. The timing is right. There's political will for police reform right now. If I can get this introduced in the next 2 weeks, it has a real shot." They worked together late into the night, Maya helping refine language while Dr. Johnson made notes about which legislators to approach first. At midnight, Dr. Johnson's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life." Martinez. It had to be. Dr. Johnson typed back, "You destroyed your own life when you decided a badge meant you could treat people however you wanted. I just made sure there were consequences." She blocked the number and went back to work. The next morning, the courtroom was packed again. Dr. Johnson arrived early with Sarah. They sat at the defense table reviewing notes when Davidson approached. "My client would like to speak," Davidson said quietly. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "In open court, he wants to make a statement before entering his plea." Judge Morrison took the bench at 9 a.m. sharp. "Mr. Davidson, I understand your client wishes to address the court." "Yes, Your Honor." Martinez stood. He looked terrible, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled. He'd clearly been up all night. "Your Honor," Martinez's voice was rough. "I want to change my plea to guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison gavelled for order. Martinez continued. "I also want to apologize to Dr. Johnson. What I did was wrong. The things I said were wrong. I let my prejudices and my ego convince me I was right when I was completely, absolutely wrong." His voice cracked. "I've spent 23 years as a cop. I thought I was one of the good ones. But that video hearing myself say those things, seeing how I treated Dr. Johnson, I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed. Doctor." Johnson watched him with no expression, no sympathy, no anger, just cold assessment. Martinez turned to face her. "Dr. Johnson, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I can't take back what I did or what I said, but I'm sorry. You deserved respect, and I gave you contempt. You deserved protection, and I gave you handcuffs. You deserved justice, and I tried to take that away from you." Tears ran down his face. "I deserve whatever punishment this court gives me." He sat down heavily. Judge Morrison looked at Dr. Johnson. "Does the defense wish to respond?" Dr. Johnson stood. All eyes turned to her. "Officer Martinez, I don't accept your apology," she said clearly. "Not because I'm cruel, but because an apology doesn't undo the violation. It doesn't give me back the 6 hours I spent in a cell. It doesn't erase the fear I felt wondering if I would survive that traffic stop. It doesn't help the 8 other victims you targeted over your career." Martinez stared at the floor. "What I will accept," Dr. Johnson continued, "is your acknowledgement of guilt, your admission that what you did was driven by racism. and your acceptance of consequences. Those things matter because they create accountability. They send a message to other officers that this behavior will not be tolerated. She paused. Let her words sink in. But here's what you need to understand, Officer Martinez. This case was never about you personally. It was about a system that protected you, a system that buried complaints, a system that allowed you to abuse your power for years without consequences. You're just the symbol. The change we're going to make is much bigger than your career or your prison sentence. She sat down. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Mr. Martinez, you've pled guilty to unlawful detention of a federal officer's civil rights violations under color of law evidence tampering and conspiracy to obstruct justice. I'm ordering a pre-sentencing investigation. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for sentencing. Until then, you're remanded to federal custody without bail. The bailiff moved forward. Put Martinez in handcuffs, the same handcuffs he'd put on Dr. Johnson. Martinez's wife was crying in the gallery. His children looked destroyed. Dr. Johnson felt no satisfaction in their pain, just grim recognition that actions have consequences. Carter stood next. Your Honor, I also wish to change my plea to guilty. Judge Morrison looked at him. Officer Carter, you've been more cooperative than your partner, but you were still complicit. You stood by while he violated Dr. Johnson's rights. You helped him craft a false story. You're not innocent here. I know, Your Honor. I'm not asking for innocence. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I'll testify against Captain Sullivan. I'll cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. I'll surrender my badge and never work in law enforcement again. I want to do whatever I can to fix what I helped break. Judge Morrison considered this. We'll address your sentencing separately. You're released on your own recognizance pending sentencing, but your badge is suspended effective immediately. Carter nodded. Sat down. He looked broken, but also lighter, like confession had lifted a weight. Court adjourned. Media chaos erupted outside again. Dr. Johnson gave another statement on the courthouse steps this time, announcing her intention to introduce the Johnson Protocol legislation within 2 weeks. This case proves the system is broken, she said to the cameras, but it also proves the system can be fixed when we demand accountability. That's what I'm demanding. That's what Americans should demand. And that's what we're going to achieve. The crowd applauded. Protesters cheered. Even some law enforcement officers in the crowd nodded their agreement. 2 weeks later, Johnson sat in a congressional hearing room. She'd been invited to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee about law enforcement reform. The hearing room was packed with senators, staffers, media, and citizens. Senator Williams, the committee chair, introduced her. Dr. Johnson, we've all followed your case closely. Your experience has sparked a national conversation about police accountability. We're eager to hear your recommendations. Dr. Johnson adjusted her microphone. Thank you, Senator. I want to be clear about something. What happened to me was not unique. It was not unusual. It happens to thousands of Americans every year, particularly Americans of color. The only difference is I had the resources and position to fight back. Most people don't. She pulled out her proposal. The Johnson Protocol is designed to address systemic failures in law enforcement accountability. It has 4 main components: mandatory verification training, independent oversight, technology requirements, and federal consequences for civil rights violations. She spent the next 40 minutes detailing each component, answering questions, providing examples, making the case that reform was not just necessary, but achievable. Senator Thompson, a conservative from Texas, pushed back. Dr. Johnson, aren't you essentially asking us to federalize local police work? No, Senator. I'm asking us to establish minimum standards for agencies that receive federal funding. If a department doesn't want to follow these standards, they don't have to take federal money. But if they take taxpayer dollars, they should be accountable to taxpayers. But won't this make officers hesitant to do their jobs? Dr. Johnson's smile was sharp. Senator, if an officer is hesitant to do their job because they can't delete evidence or ignore proper procedures, then perhaps they shouldn't be an officer. The gallery applauded. Senator Thompson sat back defeated. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, 7 senators had signed on as co-sponsors of the Johnson Protocol legislation. Walking out, then Maya met her mother in the hallway. You were incredible in there. We're not done yet. The bill still has to pass both chambers. That's going to take months and a lot of political fighting. But you'll win. You always do. Dr. Johnson hugged her daughter. Not always, baby, but I try. That's all we can do. Keep trying. Keep pushing. Keep demanding better. They walked out into the late afternoon sun, ready for whatever came next. Because the fight for justice never really ends. It just evolves into the next battle and the next until finally the system bends toward fairness instead of away from it. That evening, Dr. Johnson's phone started ringing before she even left the Capitol building. News outlets wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted her to speak at their events. Law schools wanted her to lecture. The case had made her a national figure overnight, but she'd been preparing for this moment her entire career. "Mom, your phone hasn't stopped," Maya said as they walked to the car. "Let it ring. Tonight I need to think." They drove back to Arlington in silence. The house felt different now. It wasn't just home anymore. It was the command center for a national movement. Dr. Johnson's office was already filling with letters from people who'd experienced similar treatment from police. Hundreds of stories. Thousands of shared experiences. Each one a reminder of why this fight mattered. She sat at her desk and opened the folder containing those letters. One was from a teacher in Alabama who'd been pulled over 17 times in 2 years. Another from a doctor in Michigan arrested outside his own hospital because security didn't believe he worked there. A lawyer in Georgia. An engineer in Ohio. A professor in California. All black. All professional. All treated like criminals because someone in uniform couldn't see past their skin color. Maya brought her mother tea. "You should eat something." "I will, in a minute." Dr. Johnson picked up another letter. This one was different. Handwritten. Shaky script. "Dear Dr. Johnson, my name is Patricia Williams. 3 years ago, Officer Martinez pulled me over and arrested me for having a fake insurance card. It wasn't fake. I spent 2 days in jail before my lawyer got the charges dropped. But by then, I'd lost my job because I didn't show up. Lost my apartment because I couldn't pay rent. My life fell apart because Officer Martinez decided I looked like someone who would have fake documents. I never filed a complaint because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. Thank you for showing that it's possible to win." Dr. Johnson set the letter down carefully. Her hands were shaking. "Mom?" Maya's voice was concerned. "This is why we can't stop. Patricia Williams, 8 other victims we know about. How many more are there that we don't know about? How many lives has Martinez destroyed?" "But you stopped him. He's going to prison." "One officer, one department. There are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this country, Maya. 18,000. How many have officers just like Martinez? How many have systems just like Sullivan's that bury complaints?" Dr. Johnson stood up, paced. "The Johnson Protocol is a start, but it's just a start." Her phone rang again. This time she answered. It was Senator Williams. "Dr. Johnson, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your testimony today was powerful. We have the votes in committee to move the bill forward. It'll go to the full Senate within the month." "That's good news, Senator. But there's going to be opposition. The police unions are mobilizing. They're calling this an attack on law enforcement. We need to be prepared for a fight." "I've been fighting my entire career, Senator. I'm ready." "I know you are. That's why we're going to win." Williams paused. "Also, the White House called. The president wants to meet with you next week to discuss the legislation." Dr. Johnson closed her eyes briefly. The president. "Of course, set it up." They hung up. Maya was staring at her mother with wide eyes. "You're meeting with the president." "Apparently." Dr. Johnson sat down heavily. "This is moving fast, baby. Faster than I expected." "Is that bad?" "It's dangerous. When things move this fast, mistakes happen. Opposition organizes. We need to be careful." The next morning, Dr. Johnson woke to her phone exploding with notifications. She grabbed it, saw the headlines, and her stomach dropped. Police union head calls Johnson Protocol war on law enforcement. Officers across country threaten strikes if reform bill passes. Martinez's lawyer claims trial was biased against police. She scrolled through the articles. The backlash was coordinated, well-funded. The police unions had spent the night organizing a counteroffensive. They were framing her as anti-police, framing the Johnson Protocol as federal overreach, framing Martinez as a scapegoat for political correctness. Sarah Chen called at 7 a.m. "You seeing this? I'm seeing it. We need to respond. Fast. They're controlling the narrative. Set up a press conference for this afternoon. I'll address it directly. Dr. Johnson, maybe we should be more strategic. Work behind the scenes. Let the senators handle the political fight." "No." Dr. Johnson's voice was firm. "They made this about me. I'm going to respond. They think they can intimidate me into backing down. They're wrong." At 2 p.m., Dr. Johnson stood in front of the Homeland Security building with cameras pointed at her. She wore her federal uniform today. Full credentials visible. She wanted there to be no doubt about who she was and what authority she held. I've seen the statements from police unions calling the Johnson Protocol a war on law enforcement, she began. Let me be absolutely clear. This legislation is not anti-police. It's pro-accountability. It's pro-justice. It's pro-constitution. Her voice strengthened. Good officers have nothing to fear from body cameras, independent oversight, or proper verification training. Good officers already follow these practices. The Johnson Protocol simply makes them mandatory and creates consequences when they're violated. A reporter shouted a question. What do you say to officers who claim this will make their jobs harder? I say their job is to serve and protect all citizens equally, not just the ones who look like them or talk like them or live in the right neighborhoods. If accountability makes that job harder, then they're not doing the job correctly to begin with. Tickle, another reporter. The Martinez defense team is claiming the trial was biased, that the video evidence was taken out of context. What's your response? Dr. Johnson's smile was cold. There is no context in which calling someone a welfare queen and refusing to verify their federal credentials is acceptable. There is no context in which deleting evidence is acceptable. There is no context in which conspiring to cover up a federal crime is acceptable. Officer Martinez pled guilty because the evidence was overwhelming. His lawyer's attempts to relitigate that now are desperate and dishonest. What about the claim that you're using your position to pursue a personal vendetta? A personal vendetta would be wanting revenge. What I want is systemic change. I want every person in this country to know that their civil rights matter regardless of their race. I want every officer to understand that the badge is a responsibility, not a shield. If that's a vendetta, then I'm guilty. The press conference lasted 40 minutes. By the time Dr. Johnson left, the narrative had shifted. Social media was flooding with support. Civil rights leaders were amplifying her message. Even some police chiefs were coming forward to endorse the Johnson Protocol, saying it would help them remove bad officers from their departments. But that evening, things took a darker turn. Dr. Johnson was having dinner with Maya when her security detail knocked on the door. Dr. Johnson, we've received a credible threat. Someone posted your home address online with a call for officers to pay you a visit. We're increasing your protection detail immediately. Maya went pale. Someone threatened Mom. The security officer nodded. We're taking it seriously. We'll have agents outside 24/7 until the threat is assessed. After they left, Maya turned to her mother. This is getting dangerous. This was always going to get dangerous, baby. People with power don't give it up without a fight. Dr. Johnson squeezed Maya's hand. But we're not backing down. We're not letting threats silence us. What if something happens to you? Then you carry on the fight. You finish law school. You become the lawyer I know you can be, and you make sure my work wasn't for nothing. Maya started crying. Dr. Johnson pulled her daughter close, holding her while she shook. For the first time since the arrest, Dr. Johnson let herself feel afraid. Not for herself, for Maya, for what this fight might cost her daughter. The next week, Dr. Johnson sat in the Oval Office. The president, a woman who'd made history as the first female commander-in-chief, sat across from her with reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing the Johnson Protocol. This is comprehensive, the president said. More comprehensive than anything my team drafted. Because I've lived it, Madam President, I know what's needed. The police unions are fighting this hard. They've got senators in their pocket. This isn't going to be easy to pass. Nothing worth doing is easy. The president smiled. Set down the document. Dr. Johnson, you've worked in federal service for 31 years. You could retire tomorrow with full benefits and accolades. Why are you putting yourself through this? Dr. Johnson thought about Patricia Williams, about the 8 victims, about the thousands of letters on her desk. Because I can, Madam President. I have the platform, the credibility, the resources. If I don't use those things to fix the system, who will? How can I look at myself in the mirror knowing I had the power to create change and chose comfort instead? The president nodded slowly. I'm going to support this legislation publicly. I'm going to make it a priority for my administration. But you need to understand the opposition is going to get uglier. They're going to dig into your past. They're going to look for anything they can use against you. Let them look. I've spent 3 decades in federal law enforcement. I've been vetted by 4 administrations. There's nothing to find. It's not about finding truth. It's about creating doubt. The president leaned forward. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever comes. They talked for another hour about strategy, about which senators to target, about how to build public support. When Dr. Johnson left the White House, she felt energized. The president was all in. This was really happening. But the president had been right about the opposition getting uglier. 2 days later, a conservative news network ran a story questioning Dr. Johnson's credentials. They dug up a college paper she'd written criticizing law enforcement militarization and framed it as proof she'd always been anti-police. They found quotes from anonymous officers calling her divisive and difficult to work with. Sarah called immediately. "Don't respond. Don't engage. Let them shout into the void." "Sarah, they're attacking my credibility." "And if you respond, you legitimize the attack. Stay focused on the legislation. Let the facts speak for themselves." Dr. Johnson forced herself to follow Sarah's advice. She spent the next week meeting with senators, doing media interviews about the Johnson Protocol, speaking at universities about criminal justice reform. She ignored the attacks, ignored the threatening emails that flooded her inbox, ignored the protesters who showed up outside Homeland Security headquarters calling her a traitor to law enforcement. Then came the sentencing hearing. 2 weeks after Martinez pled guilty, Dr. Johnson sat in the courtroom once more. Martinez was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His wife and children sat in the gallery, all of them crying. Judge Morrison addressed the court. "Mr. Martinez, you've pled guilty to serious federal crimes. Before I impose sentence, do you wish to make a statement?" Martinez stood shakily. "Your Honor, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about who I was. I thought I was a good cop. I thought I was protecting people, but I was protecting my own prejudices, my own ego." He turned to Dr. Johnson. "I destroyed your life for 6 hours because I couldn't admit I was wrong. I'm sorry doesn't fix that. Nothing fixes that. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend every day of my sentence thinking about what I did and trying to become someone different." Judge Morrison nodded. "Mr. Martinez, I've reviewed your file. I've read the pre-sentencing report. I've considered your expression of remorse. But I've also reviewed the evidence of your pattern of conduct over 23 years. You didn't just make one mistake. You systematically targeted people of color. You abused your authority. You violated the oath you took to protect and serve." She paused. Let the weight of her words sink in. "You've been convicted of unlawful detention of a federal officer, civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Each of these crimes carries significant penalties. The prosecution has recommended 7 years. Your attorney has asked for 3. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison." The courtroom gasped. Martinez's wife collapsed, sobbing. His lawyer shot to his feet. "Your Honor, that's excessive." "No, counselor. It's appropriate. Your client had power and he abused it. He had authority and he weaponized it. He had a duty and he betrayed it. 12 years. He'll be eligible for parole after 8 if he demonstrates genuine rehabilitation." Judge Morrison's gavel fell. "This court is adjourned." Martinez was led away in handcuffs. His family was screaming. Dr. Johnson sat perfectly still, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no joy. Just grim acknowledgement that justice had finally been served. Outside, reporters mobbed her again. "Dr. Johnson, 12 years. What's your reaction?" "My reaction is that accountability matters. Officer Martinez committed serious crimes. He violated my rights and the rights of many others. The sentence reflects the severity of those violations." His family says this is too harsh, that he's being made an example of. Dr. Johnson's eyes hardened. He made an example of himself when he chose to abuse his power. His family has my sympathy, but sympathy doesn't erase accountability. Carter was sentenced the following week. His cooperation and genuine remorse earned him 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and permanent loss of his law enforcement certification. He'd never be a cop again, but he wouldn't go to prison. Some people thought that was too lenient. Dr. Johnson thought it was appropriate. Carter had been complicit, but he'd also broken the blue wall of silence. That took courage, even if it came too late. Captain Sullivan's trial was still pending. The FBI had built a comprehensive case against him for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and violating civil rights under color of law. His trial was scheduled for 3 months out. Dr. Johnson would have to testify again. She was ready. Meanwhile, the Johnson Protocol moved through Congress. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved it with a 14-8 vote. It moved to the full Senate, where debate raged for 3 weeks. Police unions funded massive lobbying campaigns against it. Civil rights organizations funded counter-campaigns supporting it. The country watched as senators argued about accountability versus authority reform versus tradition, justice versus order. Dr. Johnson testified before the Senate twice more. Each time she was unshakable. Each time she provided evidence data and personal testimony that was impossible to refute. She brought Patricia Williams to testify, brought the other victims Martinez had targeted, gave faces and stories to the statistics. Senator Thompson, the Texas conservative who'd challenged her before, pulled her aside after one hearing. "Dr. Johnson, I want you to know I'm voting for your bill." She was genuinely surprised. "Senator, you've been one of the strongest opponents." "I was, but I went home and talked to my constituents. Black constituents, Hispanic constituents, and they told me stories about interactions with police that I never would have believed if I hadn't heard them directly. I realized I've been thinking about this from the perspective of the officers I know, not the communities they serve." He extended his hand. "You changed my mind. That doesn't happen often." Dr. Johnson shook his hand. "Thank you for listening, Senator. That's all any of us can ask." The Senate vote came on a Thursday in late spring. Dr. Johnson sat in the gallery with Maya Sarah and Deputy Director Chen watching as senators cast their votes. The chamber was tense. Every vote was announced clearly. Senator Williams, aye. Senator Thompson, aye. Senator Rodriguez, aye. Senator Jackson, nay. The votes climbed slowly. 48, 49, 50. They needed 60 to overcome the filibuster. The count continued. 58, 59. The chamber held its breath. Senator Mitchell, aye. 60 votes. The Johnson Protocol had passed the Senate. The gallery erupted in applause. Maya hugged her mother, crying. Sarah was grinning. Chen shook Dr. Johnson's hand firmly. "You did it," he said. "We did it, but it's not law yet. Still has to pass the House." "It will. The momentum is with us now." They celebrated that night, a small dinner with close friends and colleagues, people who'd supported Dr. Johnson throughout the ordeal, people who'd believed in the fight. Maya made a toast. "To my mom, who showed me that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's always worth it." Everyone raised their glasses. Dr. Johnson felt tears in her eyes for the first time in months. But the fight wasn't over. The House debate was even more contentious than the Senate. Representatives from districts with strong police union support fought the bill fiercely. They introduced amendments to weaken it. Amendments to delay implementation. Amendments to exempt certain agencies. Dr. Johnson spent 3 months in Washington, living out of a hotel room meeting with representatives daily, testifying, cajoling, explaining, building coalitions. Maya had finished her spring semester and came to help using her law school training to analyze the proposed amendments and identify which ones were acceptable compromises and which ones gutted the bill. "Mom, if we accept the Jamison Amendment, it removes the mandatory reporting requirement. That's the teeth of the whole thing." "I know, we're not accepting it. But Representative Jamison has 12 votes in his pocket. We need his support." "Not at that cost. We'll find the votes elsewhere." It was exhausting work. Endless meetings, endless negotiations, endless pressure from both sides. The police unions brought officers to testify about how the bill would endanger them. Dr. Johnson brought community members to testify about how lack of accountability had endangered them. Each side marshaled their evidence and their emotions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A police chief from Denver named Robert Martinez, no relation to the officer, came forward to support the bill publicly. "I've been in law enforcement for 34 years. Chief Martinez testified before the House Judiciary Committee. "I've worked with thousands of officers. The vast majority are good people trying to do a difficult job. But we have a problem. We have officers who abuse their authority, and we have systems that protect them instead of removing them. The Johnson Protocol doesn't attack good officers. It gives chiefs like me the tools to get rid of bad ones. It creates standards that every department should already be following. I urge you to pass this bill." His testimony moved the needle. Other police chiefs followed his lead. The narrative shifted from anti-police to pro-accountability. Representatives who'd been on the fence saw political cover to support the bill. The House vote came on a Tuesday in August, 9 months after Dr. Johnson's arrest. She sat in the gallery again, Maya beside her, watching the electronic vote board light up. The bill passed, 243 to 192. The Johnson Protocol would become law. Dr. Johnson closed her eyes, breathed deeply. It was done. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The president invited Dr. Johnson, Maya, the victim witnesses, and the police chiefs who'd supported the bill. The ceremony would take place in the Rose Garden with full media coverage. The night before the ceremony, Dr. Johnson sat in her hotel room reviewing the journey. 15 months since her arrest. 15 months of fighting, testifying, lobbying, pushing. 15 months of threats and attacks and pressure, and tomorrow it would all be worth it. Maya knocked on the connecting door between their rooms. Can't sleep. Too much adrenaline? Tomorrow's a big day. Maya sat on the bed beside her mother. I'm proud of you, Mom. I know I've said it before, but I need you to really hear it. What you've done, what you've accomplished, it's extraordinary. You took something terrible that happened to you and turned it into something that will help millions of people. That's heroic. Dr. Johnson pulled her daughter close. You know what's heroic, baby. It's you. Watching you grow through this process. Watching you find your passion for justice. Watching you decide to dedicate your life to this work. That's what makes this all worthwhile. Knowing the next generation will carry on the fight. They sat together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, two women who'd been through hell and come out stronger on the other side. The Rose Garden ceremony was everything Dr. Johnson had hoped for. The president spoke eloquently about the need for reform and accountability. She introduced Dr. Johnson as an American hero who'd turned personal injustice into national progress. The cameras captured every moment. When it was time for the signing, the president used multiple pens as was tradition. She handed the first pen to Dr. Johnson, the second to Patricia Williams, the third to Maya. Each woman held their pen like a trophy. With this signature, the president said, the Johnson Protocol becomes the law of the land. Every law enforcement agency receiving federal funding will implement these standards within 1 year. Every officer will receive proper training on verification procedures, civil rights, and de-escalation. Every department will establish independent oversight, and every officer who violates these standards will face real consequences. The crowd applauded. Dr. Johnson stood beside the president, feeling the weight of the moment. This was why she'd fought. This was why she'd endured the threats and the attacks. This was why she'd refused to back down. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed again. Dr. Johnson had done hundreds of interviews by this point. She could do them in her sleep. Dr. Johnson, what's next for you? I'm going back to work at Homeland Security. I still have a job to do keeping this country safe, but I'll also be working with the Justice Department to help implement the Johnson Protocol. We need to make sure it's enforced properly, not just written into law and forgotten. What do you want your legacy to be? Dr. Johnson thought about this. I don't want a legacy. I want change. I want a country where no one has to go through what I went through, where credentials and humanity are respected, regardless of skin color, where accountability is the rule, not the exception. If I achieve that, I don't need my name remembered. The results will speak for themselves. That evening, there was a private reception at a D.C. hotel. Civil rights leaders, the senators who'd championed the bill, the police chiefs who'd supported it, and the victims who'd testified. It was a celebration, but also a moment of reflection. Patricia Williams approached Dr. Johnson with tears in her eyes. Thank you for fighting for people like me, for making my story matter. Your story always mattered, Patricia. The system just wasn't listening. Now they have to. They hugged. Two women from different worlds brought together by injustice and united in the fight against it. Chief Martinez from Denver raised a toast. To Dr. Johnson, who reminded us all that the badge is a responsibility, not a right. May we live up to the standards she's set. Everyone raised their glasses. Dr. Johnson felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in months. Pride, accomplishment, hope. But even in that moment of celebration, she knew the real work was just beginning. The Johnson Protocol was law, but laws are only as good as their enforcement. She would need to stay vigilant. She would need to monitor implementation. She would need to fight every day to make sure the promises made today became reality tomorrow. Maya found her mother standing alone by the window, looking out at the D.C. skyline. What are you thinking about? Maya asked. I'm thinking about all the battles still ahead, about the departments that will resist, about the officers who'll try to find loopholes, about the politicians who'll try to defund enforcement of the protocol. So this isn't over. It's never over, baby. Justice isn't a destination. It's a constant journey. Every generation has to fight to maintain it and expand it. Dr. Johnson turned to her daughter. But that's okay, because now we have tools we didn't have before. We have legal standards. We have federal oversight. We have consequences. It's not perfect, but it's progress. And progress is how we move forward. Maya nodded. Then I'll fight beside you. When I finish law school, when I pass the bar, I'll join this fight. I know you will. And you'll fight battles I can't even imagine yet. That's how change works. Each generation builds on what came before and pushes further. Dr. Johnson smiled. I can't wait to see what you accomplish.
所以
They stood together, watching the sun set over the Capitol, two women who'd been tested by fire and emerged as forces for change, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, knowing that the fight for justice never ends, but understanding that every victory, no matter how small, matters in the larger war. The real test came 6 months after the signing ceremony. Dr. Johnson sat in her Homeland Security office reviewing the first implementation reports from police departments across the country. The results were mixed. Some departments had embraced the Johnson Protocol, enthusiastically implementing new training programs and oversight boards with genuine commitment. Others were doing the bare minimum, checking boxes to maintain federal funding while resisting real change. Her phone rang. It was Sarah Chen. "We have a problem. Phoenix PD just filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the Johnson Protocol. They're claiming federal overreach, violation of state sovereignty, the whole playbook." Dr. Johnson closed her eyes. She'd been expecting this. Who's representing them? The National Police Defense Fund. They've got deep pockets and they're looking for a test case to take to the Supreme Court. Then we fight. What do you need from me? Testimony, documentation, everything we use during the legislative process, and Dr. Johnson, this is going to get ugly. They're going to attack you personally again, question your motives, your credibility, everything. Let them. We've been through worse. The Phoenix lawsuit was just the beginning. Within 2 weeks, 7 more departments had filed similar challenges in different federal circuits. The legal strategy was clear: create conflicting rulings in different courts to force the Supreme Court to intervene. And the Supreme Court had a conservative majority that was skeptical of federal regulatory power. Deputy Director Chen called her into his office. "Dr. Johnson, I want you to know that the department stands behind you and the Johnson Protocol completely. But I need to ask, are you prepared for this fight to consume the next year or 2 of your life?" "I don't have a choice, James. If we don't defend this law now, it dies. And if it dies, everything we accomplished means nothing." "I know, I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were signing up for." Chen leaned back in his chair. "There's something else. The secretary wants to nominate you for a promotion, Director of Operations. It would make you the 3rd highest-ranking official in Homeland Security." Dr. Johnson was surprised. "That's a significant promotion?" "You've earned it. Your work on counterterrorism has been exemplary. The Johnson Protocol has raised your profile nationally. You're one of the most respected voices in federal law enforcement. The Secretary thinks it's time to recognize that officially." "When would this happen?" "The nomination would go through in about 3 months. Senate confirmation after that. You'd be in the new role by summer." Dr. Johnson thought about this. A promotion meant more responsibility, more authority, more platform to defend the Johnson Protocol. But it also meant more scrutiny, more pressure, more attacks from opponents. "I'll think about it," she said. That evening, she discussed it with Maya over dinner. Maya was in her final year of law school now, already fielding job offers from prestigious firms and civil rights organizations. "Mom, you should take it. You've earned it. And think about how much more you could accomplish with that kind of authority." "But the timing is complicated. The lawsuits, the implementation challenges, now a confirmation hearing where senators will grill me about the Johnson Protocol." "So you've testified before Congress multiple times. You can handle it." Dr. Johnson smiled at her daughter's confidence. "When did you get so wise? I learned from the best." 2 weeks later, the Phoenix case went to trial. Dr. Johnson flew to Arizona to testify. The courtroom was packed with officers in uniform, a show of solidarity with Phoenix PD. The lead attorney for the police department was a man named Richard Hastings, known for his aggressive courtroom style. On the stand, Hastings came at Dr. Johnson hard. "Dr. Johnson, isn't it true that the Johnson Protocol was born from personal vendetta rather than objective policy analysis?" "No, it was born from 3 decades of experience in federal law enforcement and a systematic review of civil rights violations by local police." "But it was your personal arrest that triggered this legislation, correct?" "My arrest highlighted systemic problems that already existed. It provided a catalyst for addressing those problems. That's different from a vendetta." Hastings paced, playing to the jury. "Dr. Johnson, you're asking this court to believe that you, a single federal official, know better than thousands of police chiefs and sheriffs how to run their departments." "I'm not asking anyone to believe anything except the evidence. The evidence shows that departments with strong accountability measures have fewer civil rights violations, fewer excessive force incidents, and better community relations. The Johnson Protocol simply makes those measures mandatory instead of optional." "But at what cost? Phoenix PD estimates compliance will cost them $3 million annually. That's $3 million that could go to hiring officers or buying equipment." Phoenix PD's budget is $400 million annually. $3 million is less than 1%. And the cost of lawsuits from civil rights violations, Phoenix has paid out $18 million in settlements over the last 5 years. Implementing the Johnson Protocol is actually cheaper than continuing current practices. Hastings didn't like that answer. He tried different angles, but Johnson was unshakable. She had facts, data, evidence for every claim. 3 hours of cross-examination, and he didn't land a single effective blow. The judge, a Reagan appointee named Margaret Stone, watched the proceedings with an inscrutable expression. When Dr. Johnson stepped down, she couldn't read whether they'd won or lost. Outside the courthouse, protesters on both sides clashed. Pro-Johnson Protocol activists chanting about accountability, pro-police demonstrators chanting about supporting law enforcement. It was getting heated. Security had to keep the groups separated. A reporter shoved a microphone in Dr. Johnson's face. "Dr. Johnson, are you worried the courts will strike down your law? I'm confident that when judges review the evidence objectively, they'll uphold the Johnson Protocol. This isn't about federal overreach, it's about constitutional rights. Every American has a right to due process and equal protection. The Johnson Protocol simply ensures those rights are protected." Back in D.C., the legal team was cautiously optimistic about the Phoenix case. But 3 other cases were proceeding simultaneously in different circuits. The legal bills were mounting. The Justice Department was covering costs, but there was pressure to settle, to compromise, to accept weakened versions of the protocol in exchange for ending the lawsuits. Dr. Johnson refused. "We don't compromise on civil rights. Either the Johnson Protocol stands as written, or we fight until the Supreme Court decides. No middle ground." The Attorney General called her personally. "Dr. Johnson, I admire your conviction, but you need to understand the political reality. We have 5 cases now in different circuits. We're going to get conflicting rulings. This is headed to the Supreme Court, where we face a 6-3 conservative majority that's hostile to federal regulations. We might lose everything. Then we lose fighting. We don't preemptively surrender. That's easy to say when it's not your job on the line. I have to answer to the president. She's getting pressure from law enforcement groups, from swing state senators, from donors. Everyone wants this to go away quietly. Tell the president I'll resign my position if that makes this easier politically, but the Johnson Protocol doesn't get compromised." There was a long pause. "You'd really resign?" "I'd walk away from 32 years of federal service before I'd water down civil rights protections. Yes." The Attorney General sighed. "I'll tell the president, but Dr. Johnson, you're making this very difficult." "Good. Civil rights should be difficult to take away." Maya heard about the call through the political grapevine. She confronted her mother that night. "Mom, you can't resign. That's exactly what they want. If you leave, who's going to defend the Johnson Protocol?" "The law defends itself, Maya. I'm just a person." "You're not just a person. You're a symbol. You're the face of this movement. If you resign, it signals defeat even if the law survives." Dr. Johnson knew her daughter was right, but she also knew the pressure on the administration was real. Politics was about compromise and calculation. Principles were negotiable. She'd seen it happen countless times in her career. The Phoenix ruling came down 3 weeks later. Judge Stone upheld the Johnson Protocol in full. Her opinion was scathing toward the police department's arguments. The plaintiffs asked this court to find that requiring police departments to respect constitutional rights is federal overreach. This court declines that invitation. The Johnson Protocol does not impose unreasonable burdens. It requires body cameras, verification training, and independent oversight. These are minimal standards that any department claiming to serve justice should already meet. The fact that some departments resist these standards speaks to the necessity of federal intervention, not its impropriety. Dr. Johnson read the opinion 3 times. It was a complete victory. But she knew Phoenix would appeal to the Ninth Circuit, and the other cases were still pending in their respective circuits. 2 months later, the Ninth Circuit heard the Phoenix appeal. By then, they also had rulings from the Fifth Circuit, which had struck down the Johnson Protocol as unconstitutional overreach, and the Fourth Circuit, which had upheld it. The circuit split was developing exactly as the police unions had planned. The Supreme Court would have to resolve it. Dr. Johnson was in a Homeland Security briefing on domestic terrorism threats when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it discreetly. A message from Sarah: Ninth Circuit ruled, we won, but Fifth Circuit ruling stands. Supreme Court cert petition incoming. She excused herself from the briefing and called Sarah back. Tell me everything. Ninth Circuit upheld 2-1. Strong opinion from the majority about federal authority to protect civil rights. Dissent argued states' rights. Fifth Circuit is trying to expedite their ruling to the Supreme Court. They want a decision this term. which means oral arguments in 3 months? If the court grants cert yes, Dr. Johnson, we're going to the Supreme Court. That night, Dr. Johnson couldn't sleep. She paced her office reviewing every possible argument the court might consider. Constitutional law had never been her specialty. She was a counterterrorism expert, not a lawyer, but she understood the stakes better than anyone. Maya came over with her constitutional law textbook from school. Okay, let's prep you. The conservative justices are going to hammer on the 10th Amendment, states' rights to control their own police forces. How do we counter that Commerce Clause, Spending Clause? Congress has authority to attach conditions to federal funding, and we're not telling states how to run their police. We're setting minimum standards for departments that accept federal money. They can opt out if they want. Good. What about the argument that body cameras and oversight boards are too expensive? Cost is irrelevant to constitutional analysis. Rights don't disappear because they're expensive to protect, and the data shows implementation costs are minimal compared to lawsuit settlements departments currently pay. They worked until 2 a.m. Maya asking every hard question she could think of, Dr. Johnson refining her answers. This was what the Supreme Court arguments would feel like. Rapid-fire questions from 9 justices each with their own judicial philosophy and political leanings. The Senate confirmation hearing for Dr. Johnson's promotion came first. Senator Thompson, who'd become an ally during the Johnson Protocol fight, opened with supportive remarks. But senators from law enforcement-heavy states came ready for battle. Senator Briggs from Texas started aggressively. Dr. Johnson, your nomination comes at a controversial time. The Johnson Protocol is in legal limbo. Police departments across the country are challenging it. Some people say you've prioritized a political agenda over the actual work of Homeland Security. How do you respond? Senator, with respect, that characterization is inaccurate. My performance reviews at Homeland Security have been exemplary throughout this process. I've continued to lead counterterrorism operations, coordinate with intelligence agencies, and brief the National Security Council. The Johnson Protocol work happens in addition to my regular duties, not instead of them. But you can't deny this has been a distraction. I deny that civil rights are a distraction, Senator. If we don't protect constitutional rights at home, what are we defending against terrorism abroad? Senator Briggs didn't like that answer, but the hearing room broke into applause. The chairman gavelled for order. Senator Martinez from Arizona jumped in. Dr. Johnson, the Phoenix Police Department in my state, has been very vocal about the burdens your protocol imposes. They say it's making officers hesitant to do their jobs. That response times are suffering. That crime is increasing. What do you say to that? I'd say the data doesn't support those claims. Senator, Phoenix crime statistics show no increase since Johnson Protocol implementation began. Response times are actually slightly faster. And officer complaints about hesitancy are anecdotal, not evidence-based. What the Phoenix data does show is a 42% reduction in excessive force complaints since implementation started. That suggests officers are being more careful, which is exactly what we want. Or it suggests officers are being intimidated into inaction. Senator, requiring officers to follow constitutional procedures isn't intimidation, it's basic job requirements. We don't say soldiers are intimidated because they have to follow the Geneva Conventions. We don't say FBI agents are intimidated because they need warrants for searches. Standards and accountability are part of professional law enforcement. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Dr. Johnson fielded questions about her counterterrorism work, her management style, her vision for Homeland Security's future. But the Johnson Protocol dominated. Senators on both sides used the hearing to relitigate the legislation itself. When it was over, Sarah met her in the hallway. You did great. They barely laid a glove on you. I could see Senator Briggs wanted to vote no, but couldn't find a good reason. Because there isn't one. Your qualifications are impeccable. The Johnson Protocol is legal until the Supreme Court says otherwise. They can't vote against you just because they don't like the law. The committee approved her nomination 12-8. The full Senate vote was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court granted certiorari in the Phoenix case. Oral arguments were scheduled for April. Dr. Johnson would attend, but wouldn't argue. That job fell to the Solicitor General, a brilliant lawyer named Patricia Morales, who'd argued 57 cases before the court. They met to prepare. Morales was intimidating, sharp as a blade, with a photographic memory of every Supreme Court precedent relevant to the case. Dr. Johnson, I need to understand something. If the court strikes this down, what happens? We lose 5 years of progress. Departments that have implemented reforms can roll them back. Officers who were held accountable go back to business as usual. People like Patricia Williams continue to be victims with no recourse. I'm not asking about policy impact. I'm asking about you personally. You've staked your reputation, your career, everything on this law. If we lose, you lose big." Dr. Johnson met Morales' eyes steadily. "Then we don't lose." "It's not that simple. The conservative justices are skeptical of federal power. They're going to push hard on states' rights on Congress, overstepping on whether conditions on federal spending can be this comprehensive. We need to be ready for that." "Then let's be ready." They spent 3 days in mock oral arguments, Morales playing the justices, asking every impossible question. Dr. Johnson sitting in the gallery, watching, occasionally providing factual context, but mostly just learning how Supreme Court arguments worked. It was different from district court or appeals court. 9 justices all firing questions simultaneously, interrupting counsel debating with each other through their questions. It was organized chaos where every word mattered. The Senate vote on Dr. Johnson's confirmation came on a Tuesday. She sat in her office watching C-SPAN as senators delivered floor speeches about her nomination. Supporters praised her service and leadership. Opponents questioned her judgment and priorities. The outcome wasn't in doubt, but the rhetoric was heated. The final vote was 64 to 36. She was confirmed as Director of Operations for the Department of Homeland Security, third highest-ranking official in the department, one of the most powerful law enforcement positions in the federal government. Chen called immediately. "Congratulations, Director Johnson. I'm proud to work with you." "Thank you, James. I'm proud to serve." Now comes the hard part. Supreme Court arguments in 6 weeks. You ready? "I have to be." Maya organized a small celebration dinner. Just family and close friends. Sarah was there along with Patricia Williams and several of the other victims who testified during the legislative process. Chief Martinez from Denver sent a video congratulation. Deputy Director Chen stopped by briefly before heading to another meeting. To Director Johnson, Maya raised her glass, who proves every day that standing up for what's right is worth any cost. Everyone drank. Dr. Johnson felt the weight of their expectations. These people believed in her, believed in the Johnson Protocol, believed that justice could prevail. She couldn't let them down. The weeks before oral arguments were intense. Dr. Johnson continued her regular Homeland Security duties, but every spare moment went to Supreme Court preparation. She read every brief filed in the case, every amicus brief from supporting and opposing groups, every relevant precedent. She needed to understand not just her position, but every possible counter-argument. Patricia Morales called weekly with updates and questions. "Dr. Johnson, I need you to explain something. The police unions keep citing statistics about officer injuries increasing after Johnson Protocol implementation. Are those numbers real?" "They're misleading. Officer injuries are up slightly in some departments, but that's because officers are wearing body cameras now, so all injuries get documented. Before, minor injuries often went unreported. The actual rate of serious injuries is down." "Can you get me documentation of that?" "I'll have it to you by tomorrow." The night before oral arguments, Dr. Johnson couldn't eat. She sat in her D.C. hotel room reviewing notes one final time. Maya had flown in to be there for moral support. "Mom, you need to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense." "I know. I just keep thinking about everything riding on this. If the court strikes down the Johnson Protocol, it's not just a legal loss. It's a message that civil rights don't matter as much as police convenience. That's dangerous. The court isn't going to rule based on convenience. They're going to rule based on law, and the law is on our side. I hope you're right, baby." The Supreme Court building was imposing in the early morning light. Columns and marble and the weight of history. Dr. Johnson walked up the steps with Maya beside her, Sarah just behind. They passed through security and entered the courtroom. The chamber was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate. The justices' bench dominated 9 chairs, waiting for 9 people who would decide the fate of everything she'd fought for. The gallery was packed. Officers in uniform sitting on one side, civil rights activists on the other, the nation divided waiting for judgment. Patricia Morales sat at the counsel table reviewing notes. She looked calm, composed, ready. The opposing counsel, Richard Hastings from the Phoenix case, sat across the aisle looking equally confident. At 10 a.m. precisely, the marshal announced the justices. Everyone stood. The 9 justices entered in their black robes and took their seats. Chief Justice Roberts in the center, the 4 liberal justices to his left, the 4 conservative justices to his right. The ideological balance that would determine everything. Hastings argued first for Phoenix PD. He was smooth-practiced, hitting every constitutional talking point about federal overreach and state sovereignty. The conservative justices nodded along. Justice Thomas asked about historical precedents for federal intervention in local policing.
Justice Alito questioned whether Congress had exceeded its spending power authority, but Justice Kagan pushed back hard. Counselor, you keep talking about state sovereignty.
But what about individual rights? Don't citizens have constitutional protections that apply regardless of which state they live in? Of course, Justice Kagan, but the remedy for violations is through state courts and state procedures, not federal mandates. Even when state procedures have consistently failed to provide remedies, even when we have evidence of systemic violations being ignored. Hastings stumbled slightly. The evidence of systemic failure is disputed, Justice Kagan. The record shows 8 victims in one officer's career alone, 47 similar cases in that one department over 5 years. At what point does a pattern become systemic? Dr. Johnson felt hope stirring. The liberal justices were fighting for the Johnson Protocol, but it would come down to the swing votes. Justice Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh could go either way. Morales stood for her argument. She was masterful weaving together constitutional law, practical necessity, and moral imperative. She addressed the conservative justices' federalism concerns directly. This court has long recognized Congress's power to attach reasonable conditions to federal spending. The Johnson Protocol conditions are directly related to the federal funds received and are clearly stated. Police departments know exactly what's required. They can accept the conditions or decline the funding. That's not coercion, that's a choice. Justice Gorsuch jumped in. But Solicitor General, well, the conditions here are quite comprehensive. Body cameras, oversight boards, training requirements, reporting mandates. At what point do conditions become so extensive they're no longer conditions but federal takeover of state functions? Justice Gorsuch, these requirements are the minimum necessary to protect constitutional rights. Body cameras provide objective evidence. Oversight boards ensure accountability. Training prevents violations. Reporting allows monitoring. Each requirement serves a vital purpose. This isn't federal takeover, it's federal protection of federal rights. The arguments went on for 90 minutes. Both sides hammered by questions from all 9 justices. When it ended, no one could predict the outcome with certainty. The justices gave no clear signals. Outside media chaos erupted. Dr. Johnson gave a brief statement expressing confidence in the court's wisdom and respect for its authority. She didn't say what she really thought, which was that 3 decades of work might be about to be invalidated by 5 votes. The waiting was torture. Supreme Court decisions could take months. The court wouldn't rule until June at the earliest. Dr. Johnson threw herself into work coordinating counterterrorism operations, managing her expanded responsibilities as Director of Operations, trying not to think about 9 justices deliberating in secret about whether her life's work would survive. Maya graduated from law school in May. Dr. Johnson attended the ceremony with pride bursting from her chest. Her daughter, brilliant and passionate and committed to justice, was about to become a lawyer, would fight the fights that needed fighting next. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Dr. Johnson said as they took photos after the ceremony. "I learned from the best mom. Whatever happens with the court, you've already changed the world. The Johnson Protocol exists. Thousands of departments have implemented reforms. Millions of people have better protections than they did 2 years ago. Even if the court strikes it down, you've moved the conversation forward. That matters." "Thank you for that perspective. I needed it." "Also, I got a job offer. ACLU Legal Department. They want me to work on criminal justice reform." Dr. Johnson hugged her daughter tight. "That's perfect. That's exactly where you should be." June arrived with unbearable heat and tension. Every Monday and Thursday, when the Supreme Court issued opinions, Dr. Johnson's phone blew up with speculation. But week after week, no decision on the Johnson Protocol. The court was saving it for last. That could mean anything. Finally, on the last day of the term, the court announced it would issue remaining opinions. Dr. Johnson sat in her office with Sarah and Chen watching the live feed. The Chief Justice began reading opinions on other cases: tax law, environmental regulations, criminal procedure. Then, in the consolidated cases regarding the Johnson Protocol, the court affirms the judgments of the 4th and 9th Circuits and reverses the judgment of the 5th Circuit. Dr. Johnson's heart stopped. Affirms meant they won. They won. The Chief Justice continued reading the majority opinion. It was 5-4. Justice Barrett had sided with the liberal justices to uphold the Johnson Protocol. Her opinion emphasized that protecting constitutional rights was inherently a federal concern, that the conditions on spending were reasonable and voluntary, and that the evidence of systemic civil rights violations justified federal intervention. Dr. Johnson started crying. Sarah was crying. Chen had his hand over his mouth in shock. They'd won. Against all odds, against a conservative court, against the entire law enforcement establishment, they'd won. Her phone exploded with calls and messages. Maya, Patricia Williams, Chief Martinez, Senator Williams, the Attorney General, the President's Chief of Staff. Everyone was celebrating, but Dr. Johnson sat quietly for a moment, letting it sink in. The Johnson Protocol would survive. The reforms would continue. The accountability would remain. Everything she'd fought for was preserved. She thought about that night in March, sitting in a holding cell for 6 hours, memorizing details and planning her case. She thought about Martinez calling her a welfare queen, about Carter's confession, about Chen's testimony, about Patricia Williams's letter, about all the victims and all the officers and all the political battles. It had all led to this moment. 5 votes on the Supreme Court. 5 justices who'd looked at the evidence and chosen justice over convenience. Her phone rang. It was the president. Director Johnson, congratulations. You've done something extraordinary. Not many people can say they've changed America for the better. You can. Thank you, Madam President, but the work isn't done. Now we have to make sure every department actually implements these reforms. We have to monitor compliance. We have to enforce consequences for violations. The court gave us the authority. Now we have to use it. I know you will. That's why I want to talk to you about your next role. But we'll discuss that later. For now, celebrate this victory. You've earned it. That night, there was a big celebration at a D.C. restaurant. All the people who'd fought for the Johnson Protocol, lawmakers and activists and victims and police chiefs who'd supported reform. The room was packed with hope and vindication. Dr. Johnson stood to make a toast. 2 years ago, I was arrested by an officer who couldn't see past my skin color. Today, the Supreme Court ruled that what happened to me will be harder for anyone to do to anyone else ever again. That's justice. That's progress. That's America at its best. Everyone raised their glasses. The celebration went late into the night, but Dr. Johnson left early. She had work in the morning, counterterrorism briefings, implementation reviews for the Johnson Protocol, meetings with department heads about reform enforcement. The victory was sweet, but the mission continued. She drove home through empty D.C. streets, thinking about the journey, about how one terrible night had become a national movement, about how standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, can actually work. Maya was waiting at the house. I saw the news. We won, Mom. We really won. We did, baby. We really did. They hugged in the doorway, 2 women who'd been through battle together and emerged victorious, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, knowing that the fight for justice never truly ends, but understanding that every victory makes the next fight a little bit easier. The morning after the Supreme Court victory, Dr. Johnson woke to her alarm at 5 a.m. like always. The celebration was over. The work remained. She dressed in her standard Navy suit and drove to Homeland Security headquarters through empty streets, arriving before most of the building was awake. Her new office as Director of Operations was larger, with windows overlooking the Potomac. Presidential photos lined one wall. Commendations covered another. But she barely noticed. She opened her laptop and pulled up the Johnson Protocol implementation dashboard. 18,000 law enforcement agencies. 12 months to full compliance. Current status? 42% partially HAL compliant, 31% fully compliant, 27% not yet started, 27%. Nearly 5,000 agencies that hadn't even begun implementing the reforms the Supreme Court had just upheld. That needed to change. She called a meeting with her implementation team for 8 a.m. When they arrived, she was already 3 coffee cups deep into the morning. We have a problem, she said without preamble. 5,000 agencies haven't started compliance. The Supreme Court ruling was 2 days ago. We need to light a fire. Marcus Webb, her deputy director for compliance, pulled up his own data. Ma'am, some of these departments are dragging their feet deliberately. They're hoping for a political change. New administration that won't enforce as aggressively. Then they're gambling wrong. I want warning letters sent to every non-compliant agency by end of week. They have 60 days to submit implementation plans or lose federal funding. No exceptions, no extensions. That's going to create pushback, political pressure. Let it. The law is the law. The court upheld it. We enforce it. Period. The team got to work. Dr. Johnson spent the morning reviewing agency compliance reports, flagging problematic patterns, identifying departments that were technically compliant, but clearly not implementing reforms in good faith. A department in Louisiana had body cameras, but somehow 90% of them malfunctioned during citizen complaints. A department in Mississippi had an oversight board staffed entirely by former officers. A department in Wyoming had implemented training, but attendance records showed 40% of officers had missed it. She drafted new guidance documents tightening compliance standards. sent them to the Justice Department for review, called 3 U.S. attorneys to discuss potential enforcement actions. By noon, she'd triggered investigations in 7 departments for fraudulent compliance claims. Sarah Chen called at 1 p.m. "You need to slow down. You've been director of operations for 3 weeks and you're already making enemies in half the states." "I'm doing my job. The Johnson Protocol has teeth now. Time to use them." "Dr. Johnson, I'm serious. The political climate is shifting. Midterm elections are in 4 months. If the opposition takes Congress, they'll defund Johnson Protocol enforcement. You need to be strategic." "I am being strategic. Every day we delay, people get hurt. Patricia Williams lost her job and apartment because Martinez arrested her on fake charges. How many more Patricia Williams are out there right now because some department is pretending to comply while actually doing nothing?" Sarah sighed. "I know, I just don't want you to burn out. Or get fired. You're more valuable in your position than you would be as a martyr." "I'll worry about that when it happens. Right now, I'm doing my job." That evening, Maya stopped by her mother's office with dinner. Thai food from the place down the street. Dr. Johnson hadn't eaten since breakfast. "Mom, your assistant says you've been in meetings for 11 hours straight. You need to eat." "I'm fine, baby." "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground." Maya set the food down firmly. "Eat now. I'll wait." Dr. Johnson smiled despite herself. "When did you become the parent in this relationship?" "When I realized you'd work yourself to death if someone didn't intervene." Maya sat down across from her mother. "The Supreme Court victory was huge, Mom. You won. You can take a breath." "The court said the Johnson Protocol is constitutional. That doesn't mean departments will follow it without enforcement. I can't take a breath until the reforms are actually happening on the ground. And they will be, but not if you collapse from exhaustion first." Dr. Johnson ate the pad thai slowly. Maya was right. She was pushing too hard. But every time she thought about slowing down, she remembered that traffic stop, the handcuffs, the cell, the system that had protected Martinez for 23 years. How could she rest knowing that system was still operating in thousands of departments? Her phone rang. Deputy Director Chen. She answered on speaker. "Dr. Johnson, we have a situation. Officer-involved shooting in Atlanta. Body camera footage shows the officer didn't follow Johnson Protocol procedures. The community is demanding action. The department is circling wagons. This could blow up into a national incident." Dr. Johnson was already pulling up the Atlanta PD file on her computer. "What are the details?" "Black teenager, traffic stop for broken taillight. Officer claims the kid reached for something. Video shows the kid complying with all commands. Officer shot him anyway. Kid survived, but he's in critical condition." "Has Atlanta PD conducted an investigation?" "They're calling it justified. The officer is on paid administrative leave, but they're not pursuing charges." Dr. Johnson's jaw clenched. Atlanta PD receives $42 million in federal funding annually. They've been certified as Johnson Protocol compliant for 8 months. If they're mishandling this case, that certification was fraudulent. "You want to trigger a federal investigation? I want you to call the Atlanta police chief right now. Tell him we're reviewing their compliance status. Tell him if this shooting was avoidable and they're covering it up, they'll lose every federal dollar they receive. And tell him I'm personally reviewing their case file." That's going to make headlines. Good. Let every department know that Johnson Protocol compliance isn't a checkbox exercise. It's real and it has consequences. She hung up and looked at Maya. "I have to go to Atlanta." "Mom, you just said..." "I know what I said, but this is exactly what the Johnson Protocol was designed to prevent. An officer who hasn't been properly trained or held accountable shoots a kid during a routine traffic stop. If I don't respond to this immediately and forcefully, every other department will think they can ignore the reforms." Maya stood up. "Then I'm coming with you." "Baby, you just started your job at the ACLU. You can't just take off." "My boss is the one who told me about the Atlanta shooting. She wants me to observe and learn. Civil rights law in action. So I'm coming." They flew to Atlanta the next morning. The city was tense. Protests had started outside Atlanta PD headquarters. The teenager's family was holding press conferences. Local civil rights leaders were demanding federal intervention, and the police union was accusing Dr. Johnson of prejudging the case before all facts were known. Dr. Johnson met with the Atlanta police chief, a veteran named Robert Hayes, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Director Johnson, I appreciate you coming, but I need you to understand my officer followed procedure. The suspect made a furtive movement. The officer perceived a threat. He responded appropriately." Dr. Johnson pulled up the body camera footage on her tablet. Chief Hayes, I've watched this video 17 times. The teenager, Marcus Williams, had both hands on the steering wheel. Your officer approached the vehicle and immediately escalated, yelling commands before Marcus could even respond. Marcus kept his hands visible at all times. He verbally confirmed he was complying with every instruction. Then your officer saw Marcus lean slightly to reach for his license and registration, which the officer had just demanded, and shot him 3 times. Hayes shifted uncomfortably. In the moment, Officer Daniels perceived a threat. Officer Daniels was trained under the Johnson Protocol 6 months ago. That training specifically covers de-escalation threat assessment and avoiding assumptions about suspect behavior. Marcus Williams did everything right. Your officer did everything wrong. And now a 17-year-old kid is in ICU with a punctured lung and a shattered femur. Director Johnson, I understand you're upset, but Monday morning quarterbacking officer split-second decisions isn't fair. Dr. Johnson's voice went cold. Chief Hayes, I've made split-second decisions under actual threat conditions in counter-terrorism operations. I know what real danger looks like. This wasn't danger. This was an officer who saw a black teenager and assumed threat rather than following his training. The Johnson Protocol requires verification before escalation. Your officer escalated without verification. That's a violation. Are you saying my officer is racist? I'm saying your officer either wasn't properly trained or chose not to follow his training. Either way, that's a Johnson Protocol compliance failure. And either way, your department's federal funding is now under review. Hayes stood up. You can't do that. We've been certified compliant. Your certification is contingent on actual compliance, not paperwork. I'm ordering a full audit of your department's Johnson Protocol implementation. If we find systematic failures, Atlanta PD will lose federal funding until you demonstrate real compliance. And Chief Hayes, that audit starts today. She walked out. Maya was waiting in the hallway with Sarah, who'd flown in to handle the legal aspects. That was intense, Maya said. It had to be. If I let Atlanta slide, every department will think Johnson Protocol is just for show. Dr. Johnson pulled out her phone. I'm calling the U.S. Attorney for Northern Georgia. We need to discuss federal civil rights charges against Officer Daniels. The press conference that afternoon was standing room only. Local and national media, community activists, police union representatives. The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Johnson stepped to the podium. I'm here because Marcus Williams, a 17-year-old honor student, was shot 3 times during a routine traffic stop by an Atlanta police officer. I've reviewed the body camera footage, I've interviewed witnesses, I've consulted with use of force experts, and my conclusion is that this shooting was preventable and violated Johnson Protocol standards that Atlanta PD certified they were following. A reporter shouted a question. Are you saying Officer Daniels should be charged with a crime? I'm saying the U.S. Attorney's Office will review this case for potential federal civil rights violations. I'm saying Atlanta PD's Johnson Protocol compliance is now under formal federal audit. And I'm saying that every law enforcement agency in this country needs to understand that the Johnson Protocol isn't optional, it's law, it's binding, and violations have consequences. What consequences is Atlanta PD facing? If our audit finds systematic noncompliance, Atlanta PD will lose all federal funding until they demonstrate real reforms. That's $42 million annually. Money they won't receive if they can't prove they're actually protecting civil rights instead of just pretending to. The police union representative stood up. Director Johnson, you're rushing to judgment without all the facts. You're pandering to political pressure instead of supporting officers who risk their lives every day. Dr. Johnson met his eyes. I've reviewed the facts, all of them, including Officer Daniels' training records, which show he missed 2 mandatory Johnson Protocol training sessions, including his use of force history, which shows 3 prior incidents of escalation that were never properly investigated, including Atlanta PD's Oversight Board records, which show they've dismissed 86% of citizen complaints without full investigation. Those are facts. And they tell me Atlanta PD isn't complying with the Johnson Protocol in good faith. She left the podium. The room erupted. But the message was sent. The Johnson Protocol had teeth, and Dr. Johnson wasn't afraid to use them. Over the next 2 weeks, the federal audit of Atlanta PD uncovered extensive failures. Training that wasn't happening. Oversight that wasn't functioning. Body camera footage that mysteriously disappeared when complaints were filed. The department had been gaming the system, checking boxes for compliance while doing nothing substantive. Dr. Johnson suspended their federal funding. $42 million frozen pending real reforms. The decision made national headlines. Some praised her for accountability. Others accused her of federal overreach and anti-police bias. The police unions organized protests. The Atlanta City Council held emergency sessions. But Chief Hayes called her 3 weeks later. Director Johnson were ready to negotiate a consent decree. Real reforms, real oversight, real consequences for violations. We can't operate without federal funding, you've made your point. This isn't about making points, Chief Hayes. This is about protecting constitutional rights. Send me your proposed reforms. If they're adequate, we'll restore funding. If they're not, you can try operating on city budget alone. The consent decree took 6 weeks to negotiate, but when it was finalized, it became a model for other departments. Independent Civilian Oversight Board with subpoena power. Mandatory body cameras with footage automatically uploaded to federal servers. De-escalation training quarterly instead of annually. Use of Force Review Board including community members. And most importantly, real consequences for officers who violated procedures. Atlanta became the template. Dr. Johnson's team used it to pressure other non-compliant departments. Within 3 months, compliance rates jumped from 62% to 78%. The message was clear: comply for real or lose your funding. But the political backlash was building. Conservative media attacked Dr. Johnson relentlessly. They called her a radical, an extremist, a threat to law enforcement. They dug into her past looking for anything to discredit her. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find, but that didn't stop them from creating controversy anyway. Senator Briggs from Texas called for congressional hearings. Director Johnson is abusing her authority. She's weaponizing the Johnson Protocol to punish departments that don't share her political views. This is government overreach at its worst. The hearings were scheduled for November, right before midterm elections. The timing was deliberate. Republicans were hoping to use them to energize their base to paint Dr. Johnson as a symbol of Democratic overreach to help them retake Congress. Sarah was worried. Dr. Johnson, these hearings are going to be brutal. They're going to attack everything you've done, everything you stand for, and if Republicans win the midterms, they'll defund Johnson Protocol enforcement. All of this work could disappear. Then we need to make sure people understand what's at stake. Johnson was reviewing her testimony's preparation materials. The Johnson Protocol isn't about politics, it's about rights. If Republicans want to argue that civil rights protections are partisan, let them. That tells voters exactly who they are. Maya had moved back to D.C. to help her mother prepare. She was working with the ACLU to coordinate strategy with other civil rights organizations. Mom, the ACLU is planning a major public awareness campaign, ads featuring Johnson Protocol success stories, Marcus Williams talking about how the reforms helped hold Officer Daniels accountable, Patricia Williams talking about how this would have prevented her arrest. We're going to flood the airwaves before the hearings. That's good. We need people to see the human impact. The statistics matter, but stories matter more. The congressional hearing arrived on a cold November morning. The chamber was packed with media and spectators. Senator Briggs chaired the committee with barely concealed hostility. Director Johnson, you've been in your position for 7 months. In that time, you've frozen funding for 16 police departments. You've triggered investigations in 42 others. You've created significant tension between federal government and local law enforcement. How do you justify these actions? Dr. Johnson adjusted her microphone. Senator, I justify them by pointing to results. Use of force incidents are down 18% in departments with full Johnson Protocol compliance. Civil rights complaints are down 23%. Officer safety incidents are down 11% because officers trained in de-escalation don't escalate situations unnecessarily. The Johnson Protocol is working. But at what cost? Departments are struggling with compliance expenses. Officers are reporting low morale. Some departments can't recruit new officers because of the additional scrutiny. You're crippling law enforcement. Senator departments receiving federal funding knew the conditions when they accepted the money. They agreed to comply with Johnson Protocol standards. If compliance is difficult, it's because they weren't protecting civil rights adequately before. That's not a criticism of the Johnson Protocol. That's an indictment of previous practices. Senator Martinez from Arizona jumped in. Director Johnson, isn't it true that you've personally intervened in cases like Atlanta, where local officials were handling matters appropriately, that you've overridden local decision-making based on your personal biases? No, Senator. I've intervened in cases where departments were violating federal law and covering it up. Atlanta PD certified Johnson Protocol compliance while systematically ignoring the standards. Officer Daniels shot Marcus Williams in violation of his training. The department tried to call it justified. Federal intervention was necessary because local accountability failed. But you made that determination before all investigations were complete. You prejudged the case. I reviewed the evidence. The body camera footage showed clear violations. Waiting for Atlanta PD to complete a sham investigation would have perpetuated injustice. That's precisely why federal oversight exists. The hearing went on for 6 hours. Republicans attacked. Democrats defended. Dr. Johnson answered every question with facts and data and moral clarity. She didn't give an inch. During a break, Senator Williams pulled her aside. "You're doing great, but you need to know the polling. This is energizing both bases. Republicans think you're overreaching. Democrats think you're a hero. The midterms are going to be a referendum on your work as much as anything else. Then I hope voters choose accountability over convenience." The midterm results came 2 weeks later. Republicans gained 12 House seats, but Democrats held the Senate. It was enough to create gridlock, but not enough to defund Johnson Protocol enforcement. Dr. Johnson could continue her work at least for now, but there was a cost. The political attacks had taken a toll. Dr. Johnson was exhausted. She'd lost 15 pounds. She wasn't sleeping well. Maya had noticed and was worried. "Mom, you need to take some time off. A vacation, rest, something." "I can't. There's too much work." "There will always be too much work, but if you burn out, all of this stops. You need to take care of yourself." Dr. Johnson knew Maya was right, but how could she rest when the fight continued, when departments were still resisting, when people like Marcus Williams were still getting shot? Then the call came that changed everything. It was from the White House Chief of Staff. "Director Johnson, the President, would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Can you make it?" "Of course." "What's this regarding?" "She'll discuss it with you directly. 8 a.m., Oval Office." Dr. Johnson arrived at the White House at 7:30, nervous despite herself. She'd met with the President before, but this felt different, more formal, more serious. The President was already in the Oval Office reviewing briefing papers when Dr. Johnson was shown in. She looked up and smiled. "Director Johnson, thank you for coming. Please sit." Dr. Johnson sat in one of the chairs facing the resolute desk. The President set down her papers. "I want to start by saying your work on the Johnson Protocol has been extraordinary. You've accomplished something genuinely historic. Civil rights protections that will outlast all of us. I'm proud to have you in my administration." "Thank you, Madam President. But I also want to acknowledge the cost, the political attacks, the personal toll. You've become a lightning rod for controversy. That's not fair, and it's not right, but it's reality." The President leaned forward. "I'm offering you a choice. You can continue as Director of Operations, continue enforcing the Johnson Protocol, continue this fight. Or I can nominate you for a different position, Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, second in command of the entire department. More authority, more resources, but also more distance from day-to-day Johnson Protocol enforcement." Dr. Johnson was quiet for a moment, processing. "You're asking me to choose between staying in the trenches or moving up to strategy. I'm asking what you want, what you need. You've given so much already. No one could fault you for stepping back to a role with broader responsibilities and less direct controversy." Dr. Johnson thought about the last 2 years, the arrest, the trial, the legislation, the Supreme Court, the implementation battles. It had consumed her life, changed her life. But had it been worth it? She thought about Marcus Williams recovering from his gunshot wounds, but alive and getting justice because the Johnson Protocol gave his family tools to fight back. She thought about Patricia Williams, who'd written to say she got her life back together and was now training to be a paralegal so she could help others like her. She thought about the 8 other Martinez victims who'd received settlements and apologies. She thought about the thousands of people who'd never be victimized because officers were now trained and accountable. "Madam President, with respect, I need to stay where I am. The Johnson Protocol needs someone who understands it completely, who believes in it absolutely, and who will fight for it relentlessly. I'm that person. Moving me up would be safer politically and personally, but it would weaken enforcement. I can't do that." The President smiled. "I thought you'd say that, which is why I'm doubling your implementation team budget and assigning you 3 more assistant directors. You're going to keep fighting this fight, but you'll have more support doing it." "Thank you, Madam President." "Don't thank me yet. The House Republicans are going to make your life miserable for the next 2 years. Hearings, investigations, subpoenas. They're going to try everything to stop you." "Let them try. The law is on my side. The Supreme Court is on my side. And the people who benefit from the Johnson Protocol are on my side. That's enough." Dr. Johnson left the White House energized. The fight would continue. The opposition would persist. But she had the resources and support to keep pushing forward. 6 months later, compliance rates hit 87%. Use of force incidents nationwide were down 24% from pre-Johnson protocol levels. Civil rights violations were down 31%. Officer safety was actually improving because de-escalation training meant fewer dangerous confrontations. The data was undeniable. The Johnson protocol worked. Maya passed the bar exam and officially joined the ACLU legal team. Her first case was representing a family in Texas whose son had been arrested by an officer who'd violated Johnson protocol procedures. The department tried to dismiss the complaint. Maya used the federal law her mother had created to force a full investigation. The officer was disciplined. The family received an apology and compensation. Justice served. Dr. Johnson attended the hearing sitting in the gallery watching her daughter argue with passion and precision and moral clarity. She thought about that night in the holding cell, memorizing details and planning her response. She'd had no idea then that it would lead here. To her daughter fighting the same battles. To federal law protecting civil rights. To real change happening across the country. After the hearing, they had dinner together, just mother and daughter talking about cases and strategy and the long arc toward justice. Mom, do you ever regret it? Everything you went through, the arrest, the trial, the political battles. Dr. Johnson thought about this carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Martinez arrested me, that the system protected him, that it took a Supreme Court case to establish basic accountability. But do I regret fighting back? Never. Because look at what came from it. Look at what you're doing now. Look at the families getting justice. Look at the teenagers who aren't getting shot because officers are better trained. That's worth every attack, every threat, every sleepless night. You changed the country, Mom. We changed the country, baby. You and me and Patricia Williams and Chief Martinez from Denver and Senator Williams and everyone who fought for this. Change isn't one person, it's a movement. I just happened to be the catalyst. They finished dinner and walked out into the warm spring evening. 2 years had passed since that traffic stop. 2 years of struggle and victory and transformation. The work continued, but the trajectory was clear. The Johnson Protocol was here to stay. Civil rights were better protected. Accountability was real. Dr. Johnson's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Chen. Another department just achieved full compliance. That's number 15,000. We're almost there. Almost there. 3,000 more departments to go. 3,000 more communities that would have better protections, better training, better justice. The fight wasn't over. It never really ended. But they were winning. Day by day, department by department, life by life, they were winning. Dr. Johnson looked at Maya walking beside her, brilliant and passionate and committed to carrying on this work. She thought about the next generation of activists and lawyers and officers who would be trained under Johnson Protocol standards. Who would grow up in a country where accountability was normal, where civil rights were protected, where the color of your skin didn't determine whether you survived a traffic stop. That was the legacy. Not her name on a law. Not her face in news articles. But a country that was slowly, painfully, finally living up to its promises. A country where badges meant responsibility instead of impunity. A country where justice was more than just a word. They reached Dr. Johnson's car. Maya hugged her mother goodbye. I'm proud of you, Mom, for everything. I'm proud of you too, baby, for everything you're going to do. Dr. Johnson drove home through D.C. traffic thinking about the journey. About Martinez in federal prison, hopefully learning to be better. About Carter doing community service and genuinely trying to atone. About Chief Hayes in Atlanta implementing real reforms. About the Supreme Court's 5-4 decision that had preserved everything they'd fought for. About one woman standing up to a broken system and refusing to accept injustice. About thousands of people joining that fight, adding their voices, their energy, their passion. About a movement that started with handcuffs and humiliation and transformed it to federal law. At home, Dr. Johnson changed out of her suit and made tea. She sat in her office surrounded by commendations and awards and photos with presidents. But the thing she was most proud of sat on her desk in a simple frame. A letter from Marcus Williams, the teenager shot in Atlanta. Dear Director Johnson, I wanted to thank you for fighting for me. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery. The officer who shot me is being prosecuted. My family is getting justice. None of that would have happened without the Johnson Protocol. Without you refusing to accept that this is just how things are. You showed me that the system can change if people are brave enough to demand it. When I graduate high school next year, I'm going to study criminal justice. I want to be part of making sure what happened to you and me never happens to anyone else. Thank you for your courage. It gave me mine. Dr. Johnson read the letter for the 100th time, feeling the same emotion she'd felt the first time. This was why. This was always why. Not for glory or recognition or political power, but for Marcus Williams and every other person who deserved justice and didn't get it until someone fought for them. She turned off the light in her office and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new departments resisting, new cases requiring intervention, new battles in the endless war for civil rights and accountability. But tonight she could rest knowing that the work mattered, that the sacrifice meant something, that 2 years ago she'd sat in a holding cell and decided to fight back, and that decision had changed America. The badge was no longer a shield for racism, it was a symbol of responsibility. And Dr. Amara Johnson had made that happen by refusing to be silent, refusing to accept injustice, and refusing to let Martinez and officers like him define what law enforcement meant in America. Justice had spoken, and it would keep speaking as long as people like Dr. Johnson and Maya were willing to fight for it. The Johnson Protocol was law, the reforms were real, the change was happening, and somewhere tonight someone was driving home safely from a traffic stop that 2 years ago might have ended differently. Someone was filing a complaint that would actually be investigated. Someone was watching body camera footage that would provide accountability instead of disappearing. Someone was living in a country that was finally slowly becoming more just. That was the victory, not a moment, not a verdict, but a movement toward the America that should have existed all along, the America worth fighting for. The America Dr. Amara Johnson had helped create by standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow's work, ready to continue the fight knowing it was far from over, but confident they were on the right path. Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice fought for, and one is justice that lasts. And the Johnson Protocol would last because it was built on truth, defended with courage, and sustained by people who refused to accept anything less than equality under law. The story didn't end. It evolved. It grew. It became part of the fabric of American justice. And it all started with one woman in handcuffs who refused to let that moment define her or defeat her, who turned violation into victory, who transformed pain into progress, who proved that one person standing up for what's right can change everything.